Chapter 8:14. In less than half an hour, Zhang Yan arrived at the entrance of Beichen sect. He waved his sleeves to disperse the clouds and looked down. He saw that the formation was shut tight. The people in the sect must have taken control of the situation. However, he sensed that the spiritual vigor in the mountain was still surging, as if the battle had not ended. He raised his eyebrows slightly. With the abilities of a third-degree realm cultivator, it didn't matter how many of them there were. Logically speaking, they should have taken down the invading enemy long ago. Now that there was no result, could it be that this person had brought along some strange treasure to smash him? He thought for a while and raised his hand to cast a spell. It turned into a talisman, and with a flick of his finger, it shot into the water. This was a summoning talisman. As long as there were demon cultivators in the surrounding waters who had been appointed by Qinsong School, they would definitely come to pay their respects when they sensed the talisman. Not long after, the waves on the riverbank split into two. Elder Miao Chang stepped on the waves and bowed. This little demon pays respect to Zhenren Zhang. Zhang Yan nodded at him and said, Elder Mian Chang Ju, so you are here. What is the situation in the mountain now? Elder Mian Chang Ju said shamefully, to tell you the truth, just now the situation is critical. Fortunately, Guang Yuan sect Zhenren Shun came to help and trapped the 6 people. But we have not taken them down yet. He still had lingering fears. He thought that with his strength path 4th rank cultivation, together with Elder Qi Changju, even if they could not defeat the intruders, they would be able to block them. But he did not expect the intruders to release their blood souls and force them into a corner. They could not help Yen Changju and his wife at all. In the end, they had no choice but to hide in Zhuo River Hut. Fortunately, Shen Yinfeng came in time, or the result would be unpredictable. Zhang Yan said in a low voice, lead the way. Elder Mian Changju said, please follow me. Then he lowered his body and dived into the water. Zhang Yan descended from the clouds and used the water escape technique to follow him to the bottom of the water. There was a formation door here that could bypass the mountain gate formation and enter Danyang Mountain. This path was specially opened when the North Star sect was building the altar. It was for the sake of convenient reinforcements from the Yuan tribe in case the cultivators of the Fiend sect attacked. Of course, the North Star faction wasn't completely defenseless against these demon cultivators. Unless it was a time of danger, this door was normally closed. As soon as Zhang Yan stepped out of the array door, he saw Elder Yen and his wife, as well as Elder Qi of the Yuan tribe, waiting for him. Upon seeing him, they all bowed in greeting. Elder Yen cupped his fists and said, thank you, Taoist Zhang, for coming to save us. If not, our North Star sect would be in trouble. Zhang Yan said seriously, since I want everyone to contribute, how can I abandon you? This is something that should be done. Elder Yen nodded his head and sighed. In the demonic calamity, if the small sects wanted to survive, they had to listen to the big sections. With a decree from the upper sect, they had no choice but to obey. In other words, Zhang Yan didn't treat them as sacrificial pawns. If it was someone else, he might not care about their lives. Zhang Yan looked up and saw a thick bloody aura a few miles away. It was actually tens of thousands of bloody spirits flying back and forth. However, they were blocked by countless golden talisman, making it difficult for them to find a way out. 2 spiritual vigor, one trying to break out, the other trying to stop them. They were colliding with each other and looked extremely intense. However, their vision was blocked by a mountain, so they couldn't see the whole battle. Elder Yen sighed and said, once the Heaven and Earth Seal technique is activated, we can't interfere in the battle. However, the mountain gate formation is closed, so I'm not afraid that the 6 of them can escape. Zhang Yan thought for a while and smiled. Everyone, follow me to take a look. With a wave of his sleeves, he wrapped the 4 of them up and flew towards the mountain. Not long after, they landed on the mountain. Looking over, they saw a middle-aged Taoist standing in midair. He looked extremely relaxed, and opposite him, the 6 Yuanying demon sect elders were locked by the Heaven and Earth Seal technique. They couldn't move, but even so, they could still cast spells. However, every time they got in front of Daoren, they were blocked by a talisman that appeared out of thin air. They couldn't hurt him at all. Elder Yen looked and said, although Elder Shin Changjue has restrained this person, it seems that you can't take him down. With Zhenren Zhang here, it shouldn't be hard to subdue him. Zhang Yen smiled and said in a clear voice, fellow Taoist Shin, it's time to pull in the net. Elder Shin Changjue chuckled and threw out a small talisman that glowed with a golden light. When the talisman flew outside, it spread out to 100 feet in the wind and released layers of golden light. When the 6 people were illuminated by the light, they immediately felt their heads become heavy and their feet became light. One by one, they fell from the sky and were sucked into the talisman along with their blood souls. Then, the golden light turned into a small talisman and fell back into his hand. Besides Zhang Yen, everyone else was visibly moved when they saw this scene, and they said in shock, what magic treasure is that? It's so powerful. They could see that the 6 demon sect elders were invaded by the light and couldn't resist at all. If this item was used on them, they wouldn't be able to escape the same fate. Zhang Yen nodded and thought, looks like fellow Taoist Shin's luck isn't shallow. You obtained something good from Zhenren Shinchang's remains. He saw very clearly that the small talisman wasn't a true weapon, but it had such power. It wasn't something that a normal cultivator could make. If he had this item with him during the sword battle of the 18 sects, he would have used it long ago. Therefore, it should have been obtained later on. After Elder Shin Changjue collected the 6 people, he rode the astral wind to where everyone was. When he got close, he bowed and said, greetings, fellow Taoist Zhang. He took out the small talisman and handed it over. These 6 people have been captured and are now in fellow Taoist's hands. Zhang Yen didn't stand on ceremony and took the golden talisman. After looking at it, he kept it in his sleeve and said, this time, I was fortunate to have Elder Shin Changjue's help. I was able to eliminate the invading enemies. When I return to the sect, I will report to the sect head and request for a great merit for your Guangyuan sect. When Elder Shin Changjue heard this, he was delighted and bowed and said, thank you, fellow Taoist. Even though he had obtained the talisman of Taoist Shinchong and completed 2 of the best techniques, to practice this technique, he needed many external items. Now that they were in the midst of the devil's calamity, it was extremely difficult to find them. However, if he could get the help of the Qinsong school, he wouldn't have to worry about this anymore. Zhang Yen smiled. His action was also to tell the sects that as long as they were willing to work hard for the Qinsong school, he would not be stingy with rewards. However, Elder Mian Changjue complained, so Zhenren Shun could have easily taken down these cultivators from the devil's sect, then why didn't he do it sooner? Instead, he made us nervous for no reason. Shen Yinfeng chuckled and said, just now, Daoren sensed that there is a cultivator from the devil's sect who is no weaker than us coming here, but he was stopped by fellow Taoist Zhang outside the mountain. Now that the battle has been decided, he must be afraid that the 2 of us will join forces and try to escape. Fellow Taoist Zhang should have easily caught such a big fish. How could you ruin things just because I was happy? That's why I purposely trapped him and didn't kill him, so that he could escape here. However, I didn't want to make everyone worry, which is Doran's fault. There's actually a 3rd-degree realm cultivator here? Elder Yen Changjue didn't know what was happening outside the mountain, but when he heard this, his expression changed. The Devil's Sect had even sent out a 3rd-degree realm cultivator, which meant that they had the intention to destroy Bei Chen in one fell swoop. If it wasn't for the thorough arrangements this time, there would be no chance of survival. He couldn't help but turn around and asked, may I ask Zhenren Zhang, how is the unknown person now? Zhang Yen smiled faintly. He has been killed by my flying sword. Everyone present was shocked. Which one of the 3rd-degree realm cultivators in Yuanying wasn't an outstanding talent in the sect? They didn't expect him to be killed just like that. It had to be known that it had only been less than an hour since the Devil's Sect cultivator attacked the mountain. Elder Qi Changjue, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly spoke, I wonder if this person will come for revenge? Shen Changjue laughed. The Devil's Sect has designs on a small sect, but in reality, there is no benefit to it. If it wasn't for the fact that they were forced to make a move on the altar, they wouldn't have mobilized so many people. Today, a 3rd-stage realm cultivator has fallen here. If they were to make a move, they would definitely be cautious and wouldn't be like today. Everyone thought that was reasonable and nodded in agreement. Elder Mian Changjue rolled his eyes and flattered, "If it were up to me, there's no need to be afraid. No matter how cunning this person is, didn't he still fall into Jinren Zhang's trap? Even if he comes again, he will be dealt with the same way." Zhang Yan waved his hand. This time, he was able to successfully kill the enemy because he had more people than the other party. As long as he didn't make any major mistakes in his arrangements, it wasn't difficult to defeat the opponent. But this was only a small advantage for now. Once the Devil's Cave appears, the initiative will be in the hands of the Devil's Sect. Lu Mei Junyang whispered, "Master, it's not the way to treat a guest here." Elder Yen Changjue smiled, "It's me who has neglected our esteemed guest." He turned to the side and said, "Everyone, why don't we go to Zhujiang's hut for a chat?" In front of Linqing Monastery's mountain gate, the surrounding 100 miles was shrouded by a pale white mist. Millions of Yin soldiers were faintly discernible, surrounding Green Bull Mountain. On the cloud couch in the sky, there was an elegant Taoist without a crown on his head. He was leaning on a soft cushion, leaning on his elbows, holding a scroll of painting in his hands, engrossed in it. There was a flash of light from below, and an elder Changjue came to the front of the couch. He bowed and said, "Jinren Su, we've set up bait a few times, but that Peng Yuzhou still refuses to come out." Taoist Su yawned and stretched her limbs. She said lazily, "Isn't that a good thing? Otherwise, I'd have to spend more effort." Elder Changjue Yang frowned and said, "But if this person doesn't come out, we won't dare to force our way in. Jinren Su has the highest cultivation level among us, and before we left, Junior Marshal Brother Feng also told us to listen to your orders. Jinren can't refuse." Taoist Su turned around on the couch and said with her back facing him, "With Elder Changjue Yang here, we'll leave everything to him." Elder Changjue Yang still wanted to say something, but suddenly a spiritual light flew over. Taoist Su immediately sensed it and grabbed it. However, after looking at it for a while, she suddenly sat up and let out a long sigh. She said, "Sigh, I've been friends with fellow Taoist Feng for over 300 years, but I didn't expect him to end up like this." Elder Changjue Yang's heart jumped and he asked in panic, "Jinren Su, how is Junior Marshal Brother Feng?" Taoist Su's faint voice came over. Fellow Taoist Feng failed to stop Zhang Yan and was killed. Now, his spirit and soul are both destroyed. Elder Changjue Yang cried out, "How is that possible? Junior Marshal Brother Feng has the talisman given by Jinren. Even if he can't defeat Zhang Yan, he can still escape." Taoist Su still had her back facing him. She threw the letter and said, "This is a letter from your blood soul sect, it can't be fake." Elder Changjue Yang hurriedly took the letter. After reading it with trembling hands, his face turned ashen. Taoist Su's eyes flickered and she said in a low voice, "Zhang Yan is likely to come to Linqing Monastery's aid. We can't stay here for long. Pass down my order, retreat quickly." Blood Soul Sect. Inside the meeting platform cave, there sat a Taoist with a tall crown on his head, phoenix eyes, red lips, and skin like jade. At this moment he was adjusting his chi activity. Behind him, countless blood shadows flickered and swayed. It was a breathtaking sight. This person was the third-generation head disciple, Bailey Qingyin. He had a gentle and beautiful appearance, but he was tall and slender. He wore a large red jade robe and sat there, full of spirit. At this moment he suddenly felt something and his eyes revealed traces of bloody light. He asked, "Who is outside?" Footsteps sounded and a disciple walked in. He bowed and said, "Jinren, it is Bone In Sect's Jinren Su who requests an audience." Bailey Qingyin said, "Please." Taoist Su walked inside and looked straight at him. This was the first time he saw the first person of Blood Soul Sect's third generation. He was slightly surprised by his feminine beauty, but he didn't show it on his face. He came up and greeted, "Jinren Bailey, greetings." Bailey Qingyin's phoenix eyes looked over and said, "You are Su Yenzhong? I have heard Taoist Ji mention you. Sit down and talk." When he said this, his voice was so loud that it reverberated in the room, and there was an indisputable tone in it. When Taoist Su heard this, She couldn't help but be suppressed by his aura, and a feeling of admiration arose in her heart. She couldn't help but be shocked, and she secretly compared him with her eldest senior brother in her own sect. She thought that the two of them were equally matched. They had both reached the peak of the third degree and were only a step away from entering the heaven's abode. Her expression couldn't help but become a bit more respectful. She obediently sat down and said, "Thank you, Senior Brother Bailey." Bailey Chingin sat up straight and said in a loud voice, "This time, for my sex matter, Taoist Su has traveled back and forth, thank you for your trouble." Taoist Su hurriedly said, "Don't mention it, it's nothing. Besides, I didn't help much." Saying this, he shook his head slightly and said with regret, "I have been friends with Taoist Feng for 300 years. It's a pity that he lost his life in the North Star. It's a pity." Bailey Chingin flung his sleeve and said in a loud voice, "This is just a small setback, it's nothing. When the spirit cave comes into being, it will be the time for our profound and spirit sects to determine the winner and loser. Taoist Su shouldn't be discouraged because of this." Taoist Su echoed, "Senior Brother Bailey is right, but, forgive me for asking, Taoist Feng failed this time. May I ask how your sect will deal with him?" Although Feng Qingping was dead, he still had a wisp of his soul on the spirit steel in the sect. This was to prevent his body and soul from being destroyed in case something happened to his disciple. However, the mission failed this time. If it was just his own death, then so be it, but he implicated 6 elders on duty, Elder Chalk, and died together. This was no small matter. In order to appease these teachers and disciples, it was very likely that his soul would be destroyed. Bailey Qingyin said with emotion, "Qingping's matter was approved by me. Even if there is guilt, it should be borne by me. Besides, although he was defeated, he fought to the death and didn't take a step back. He didn't lose my sect's face. On the next day, I will personally send him to reincarnate." Taoist Su was a little surprised at first, then he revealed a look of admiration. He knew that this matter was handled by Feng Qingping alone. He originally wanted to make a contribution so that he could take over the position of the third-generation head. Bailey Qingyin originally didn't agree, but the former borrowed the power of his teachers to pressure him, and thus obtained the decree. He originally thought that there should be discord between the two. Even if Bailey Qingyin wouldn't hit him when he was down, he would still look on without lifting a finger. He didn't think that Bailey Qingyin would actually disregard the former enmity and instead take over this matter, showing the breadth of mind of a sect's eldest senior brother. Sighing inwardly, he stood up and said, "I have a presumptuous request. I wonder if Taoist Bailey can approve it?" Bailey Qingyin said, "Please speak." Taoist Su said, "Can you allow me to send Taoist Feng to reincarnate?" Bailey Qingyin's gaze turned and focused on him for a moment, saying, "Taoist Feng wants to take Qingping as a disciple." Taoist Su said seriously, "Yes, I owe Taoist Feng many favors in the past, but I don't have the chance to return them, so I want to use this as a slight compensation. I can swear here that no matter what his aptitude is in his next life, I am willing to take him as a disciple." Bailey Qingyin said with a faint smile, "Is this also Uncle Master Zhao's intention?" Taoist Su was slightly startled, not wanting to be seen through, and could only say embarrassedly, "When I came, I did go to Myriad Spirit Cliff to pay a visit. Taoist Feng is his disciple after all." Bailey Qingyin waved his hand and interrupted him, saying, "I also know Uncle Master Zhao's concerns. This is also good. Qingping usually thinks highly of himself and has offended many people. This reincarnation, his safety is hard to guarantee. If someone finds an excuse to harm him, it would be inappropriate. Since Junior Brother Su is willing to take him in, I can fulfill your wish." Taoist Su made a Tao salute and said sincerely, "Many thanks, Senior Brother Bailey." Bailey Qingyin said, "After Junior Brother Su returns, please send my regards to Taoist Ji." Taoist Su bowed and said, "I will definitely bring it." He slowly retreated to the side of the cave abode before turning to leave. After he walked far away, that disciple just now walked in again and said, "Elder Tan Changjue is here, waiting outside." Bailey Qingyin said, "Call him in." Not long later, a tall and skinny boss slowly walked into the cave abode. His expression was solemn, holding a name list in his hand. He first went forward to greet, then sighed and said, "Senior brother, in this battle, we lost a total of 7 elders Changjue. In addition to Elder Ba Changjue who died in Linqing Monastery, as well as Lu Changjue and Old Chalk whose whereabouts are unknown for a long time, the Kan and Yuan Pons have lost a total of 9 Yuanying cultivators. Especially with junior brother Feng's death, the sect has lost a talented person. It is really a blow to the bones. Senior brother, please choose people from the disciples as soon as possible to help him increase his cultivation, so as to make up for the inadequacies." Bailey Qingyin, however, flatly denied, saying, "No. How can those who forcefully borrow external objects to increase their cultivation fight against the cultivators of the Shenmen in the future? This is killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Absolutely not." Elder Tan Changjue stroked his beard and said, "Then why not call back the Yuanying elders Changjue who are outside tempering their cultivation?" Bailey Qingyin sternly said, "The spirit cave will appear in 30 years. If we call them back now, not to mention that it is too early, it will also make the Shen men mistakenly think that we have suffered this defeat and are already exhausted, raising the arrogance of the other generation. Therefore, not only can we not shrink back even a little, we still have to send more people." Elder Tan Changjue was a little embarrassed, saying, "Senior brother also knows that the matters that the few spiritual masters have entrusted to us recently, if we don't have enough people, it is really difficult to resolve." Bailey Qing laughed loudly, saying, "What's so difficult about that?" He circulated his Xian Qi. In just a moment, 8 figures appeared behind him, their appearances no different from the 8 elders Changjue who had already passed away. He pointed to his left and right and said, "These 8 blood spirits have 10% of my power in them. They are more than enough to be taken care of by the 4 spiritual masters. I just need to come back every day to replenish my energy." Elder Tan Changjue was overjoyed, saying, "Since senior brother is helping, then there is no need to worry." He was secretly shocked, saying, "Senior brother Bailey's mana is becoming more and more profound. I wonder when he will become a heavenly abode. Among our 6 sect's 3rd-generation disciples, in terms of mana, senior brother Bailey is fully deserving of being number 1, even Yuan Hongyang is slightly inferior. I heard that the Qinsong School's Zhang Yan has reached the 1st grade. His mana is vigorous and unfathomable, no one in the same generation can compare to him, but I wonder who is stronger between him and senior brother Bailey?" Seeing that he was silent, Bailey Qing asked, "Is there anything else?" Elder Tan Changjue came back to his senses, bowing, saying, "Then how should we deal with the spell altars built by the sects? Are we going to leave them alone?" Bailey Qingyin pondered for a moment, saying, "Our Xianling and Xianling sects have not yet reached the time for a real contest. There is no need to fight head-on with the Qinsong School. We can order our disciples to form groups of 3 to 5 and release the blood souls to harass them day and night to suppress their momentum. If there are any losses, the sect can make up for it." Elder Tan Changjue pondered for a moment, finally saying, "That's the only way." Then he asked for instructions on several important matters one by one, after which he excused himself and left. Bailey Qingyin stood up, coming to the west side of the cave. There was a screen here on which hung many portraits. There were more than 10 of them. Every one of them was a talent of the 10 sects of Shenmen, and in the first place was the portrait of Zhang Yan. His gaze focused on it for a moment, saying to himself, "Zhang Yan, on the day the spirit cave appears, I will personally meet with you. I hope you do not disappoint me." After Zhang Yan resolved the Beichen sect's crisis, he did not rush back, but rode on the twin dragon's flying carriage to inspect the various sections. The 10 heads of the Qinsong School personally paid a visit. These small sects were flattered, one after another urging their disciples to speed up the construction of the spell altars. Previously, although Zhang Yan had given the order, they were actually not very willing, afraid that if they angered the devil sect, no one would stand up for them at the time. Now that they knew that Zhang Yan was personally going to help the Beichen sect, killing as many enemies as possible, they no longer had their previous worries. This time, Zhang Yan wandered outside for a month, then went to Pinyuan sect, seeing that there was no movement from the Blood Soul sect. Only then did he set off to return to the sect. A day later, he returned to the clear nether heavenly lake, stopping the carriage at the top of the mountain. When he came out, he saw Wei Zihong waiting at the side, bowing and saying, "This disciple greets master." Zhang Yan said warmly, "When did you return?" Wei Zihong said truthfully, "Just returned from the North Nether continent yesterday." Zhang Yan nodded slightly, and just as he was about to enter the house, his expression changed, and he looked back only to see a water-like rainbow flying over from the sky, landing in front of the mountain. Then, the light turned, and Han Wonka walked out, bowing and saying, "Junior apprentice brother Zhang, greetings." Zhang Yan took a few glances and couldn't help but smile, bowing and saying, "Senior apprentice brother Han has cultivated the Dharma body, and your skills have improved greatly. I have to congratulate you." Han Wonka sighed and said, "I was just lucky." Zhang Yan said with a smile, "Senior apprentice brother Han, there is no need to be modest. If not for some reason, with senior apprentice brother's talent and foundation, you should have entered this realm long ago." The two exchanged a few pleasantries, and just as they were about to enter the house to talk, they suddenly felt a slight tremble under their feet, as if the mountains were trembling and the spirit chi in the sky rolled, full of whistling sounds. Turning around, they saw that in the southeast direction of the East Flower continent, a jade light suddenly shot up into the sky. It was indistinct, and one couldn't tell what it looked like. It was like a huge Ganoderma that covered the clouds. Han Wonka couldn't help but be moved, and he exclaimed, "The aura shook the continent, and the heaven and earth moved. Someone has achieved the position of paradise." He took a few glances and said, "It's a pity that I can't tell what it looks like, and it's hard to know. That direction, could it be a Zhenren from Taihao School?" Zhang Yan's eyes squinted, and he tilted his head to ask his disciple, "Zihong, what do you think?" Wei Zihong's god eye opened, and a ray of spiritual light shot out. After taking a few glances, he shook his head and said, "This person's spirit chi is strange and complicated, with a myriad of strands. However, it is tangled up in one area, and it's as if it's a single entity. He isn't someone from our Xianmen sect." Han Wonka's expression changed, and he said solemnly, "Based on junior nephew Wei's words, it does seem like the style of Jioling's sect. I didn't expect that after junior uncle Shun, there would be someone from the demon sect who entered paradise." Zhang Yan smiled calmly, "It's just a guess. Let's wait for a few days and we will know." Chapter 8:15. The spiritual chi that soared into the sky scattered across the sky, and even a large part of the clouds in the sky collapsed. Just now, a month later, it disappeared. The various small sects in the Donghua continent, upon seeing such a commotion, sent their disciples out to find out. Zhang Yan was one of the top 10 disciples in the sect. After just one day, he received a letter from the Xianshui Palace. The person who achieved the grotto heaven this time was actually the cultivator of the Jioling sect, Hibiko Higashi, who he had interacted with in the past. After hearing this news, his eyes couldn't help but darken a little. From today onwards, another person in the world had become a player from a chess piece. He did not know when he would be able to enter this realm and then transcend the mortal world. He was very clear that he had not become the disciple of the Taoist paradise. If he had not coincidentally encountered these three great tribulations, it would have been very difficult for him to have a chance to stand out. Therefore, he had to firmly grasp this rare opportunity. There are only 30 years left until the appearance of the Devil's Cave. Although the general arrangements have been made, it is still not enough. In this battle of the mystic demons, there was no need to think too much. The demon sects would definitely do their best to seize the spirit cave and strengthen themselves. And because of the geographical advantage, no matter how the mystic sects calculated, they would definitely know the location of the Devil's Cave first. Don't underestimate this point. He deduced that the situation at that time was very likely that the 6 demon sects would occupy the Devil's Cave first, set up a battle array, and wait for the mystic sects to come. This kind of head-on collision could be said to be extremely dangerous. Any kind of strategy would not be of any use. It would depend on who had more cultivators, who had higher cultivation, and who could withstand more losses. As one of the 3 major mystic sects, the Qinsong school would definitely bear the majority of the heavy responsibility. In other words, he would have to shoulder it all on his own, and he would have to use as much strength as he could. It could be said that it was the biggest challenge he had ever cultivated. It was the biggest test and difficulty he had encountered. And because he was not from the Grotto Heaven sect, the support he could receive was actually extremely limited. Although he had the help of the mystic sects, it was not at the point of life and death. How many people could the other 9 sects provide? It was really hard to say, so he definitely could not count on them. He picked up a jade booklet from the table. It was delivered yesterday from the Merit and Virtue Courtyard. The day before he returned to the mountain gate, Luo Qingyu, Zhuang Bufan, Xiao Sha, Han Suyi and the others left their positions and went to the third supreme temple to cultivate. Because of the battle in the Devil Cave, all 10 disciples had to fight. This was done in order to leave enough time for the successor to manage his or her own forces, so that he or she wouldn't be in a hurry and get into a mess. In this list, the rankings of the top 10 disciples had already been rearranged. Now, he was in the first seat, followed by Ning Chongxian, followed by Qin Nan, Chen Feng and Feng Kong. These were all people who had achieved Yuaning. After that, they were all core transformation cultivators. They were divided into Du Jushi, Zhang Shanghong, Yi Mingxian, Xiao Chua, and Han Mengdai. Although these core transformation realm disciples couldn't help much, they had Taoist heavenly abode behind them. When they went to battle, they would definitely be sent out to protect them, so they could more or less be considered a help. Zhang Yan put down the book. After pondering for a long time, he said, "Jing Yu, go and find Kai Wei." Jing Yu heard this and immediately went to pass the order. After a while, Wang Kaiwei entered the cave, came up to greet him, and called him master. Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "Kaiwei, I called you here because I need you to go to Dongxing continent." Wang Kaiwei was surprised. "Master, is there something on Junior Apprentice Brother's side?" Zhang Yan shook his head. "The Devil Cave is about to appear. I still feel that I don't have enough power, so I need you to go to Dongxing continent to recruit Yuaning cultivators. As long as they are willing to come, I will allow them to do whatever they need. As for Song Chuyuan, Tang Jin, and the others, they can come if they want to, but don't force them if they don't want to." Wang Kaiwei thought for a while and said, "The 2 Taoists also have a heart for Tao, maybe they are willing to come here. But if that's the case, Junior Apprentice Brother will have fewer people to protect him." "Zhang Yan, it's okay. This time, I will let Zhang go with you. He is from the Netherworld Spring sect, so it's not convenient for him to intervene in this battle of mystical demons. Let him stay in Dongxing continent and look after Deep Abyss sect." Wang Kaiwei asked again, "Disciple will go out, when should I return?" "Zhang Yan, I will give you 25 years. By then, no matter how many people you recruit, you must return in time to avoid accidents." Wang Kaiwei said seriously, "Disciple will obey master's order." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Go." Wang Kaiwei bowed deeply and then left. Zhang Yan knew in his heart that after the several battles in Dongxing continent, the various sects' vitality was greatly damaged, and the people in charge of the immortal city had no lack of cultivation materials, and loved to enjoy life, so there was a high chance that they would not come. Zhongtai sect might send 1 or 2 people over on account of their relationship, but the 3 sects in the south would definitely not bother. So this time, they could only recruit some rogue cultivators, and getting 4 or 5 people was already not bad. But no matter what, they were still Yuaning cultivators. As long as they did not go up against third-stage cultivators, they would be able to support the situation no matter where they went. In this way, including the people who could be mobilized under the sect, and the 10 over elders of Yuan tribe, the number of people that could be used was about 30 or so. But the most important thing was that he had Ping Yuzhou and Han Wanka by his side, and when the time comes, he would invite Shen Yinfeng to help. Including himself, there would be a total of 4 Yuaning third-stage cultivators. No matter where they were placed, they would be a force that was not weak, and they would be able to go head-to-head with the Devil sect. Other than that, he had another concern. Because the demonic caves were extremely important to the demonic sect, it was conceivable that they would bring out powerful magical treasures this time. It was even possible that they would bring out true weapons. This would add countless variables to this battle. Towards true weapons, no matter which side, even if they only had one in their hands, if they used it at the crucial moment, it would be enough to decide the outcome of the battle. After thinking for a while, he shook his sleeve, and a large battle-axe flew up, riding on a golden light. When it was in mid-air, a spiritual light appeared from it, and it transformed into a young general in black robes and black armor. He looked at Zhang Yan cautiously and asked, "Why did you summon me, enlightened master?" Zhang Yan looked at the true spirit of the magical weapon and said with a smile, "I remember that after the demon slaying last time, I kept my promise and drove fellow Taoist in the future, but fellow Taoist did not leave. Today, I would like to ask if fellow Taoist has any other plans?" The young general was silent, and after a while, he said, "Does enlightened master know of my background?" Zhang Yan heard the meaning in his words, and it seemed that he was willing to reveal his background. This made him a little interested, and he said, "I do not know, I would like to hear the details." The young general sighed, "My old master also cultivated in Donghua continent, and I believe enlightened master has heard of his name. The Tai Heng grand ancestor who was the leader of Xian, demon, and demon 10,000 years ago." Zhang Yan couldn't help but be surprised, and he said, "So your master is the Tai Heng grand ancestor. Speaking of which, you have a deep connection with my Qinsong school." The young general nodded. "That's right. Back then, I once asked your Qinsong school's founding ancestor, Tai Mingjinren. After returning to the mountain, he used me to cut off a section of the dragon's tail, and then practiced the Xianmen orthodox technique to ascend to Tao. After that, he gave me to his first disciple, Yizhiyang, until that old man Dami borrowed me to Dongxing continent. I didn't expect that I would stay there for nearly 10,000 years. Zhang Yan said, "If that's the case, you must be able to see that I's sixth disciple is the reincarnation of Jinren Yi." The young general looked up and said with a straight face, "It is precisely because of this that I am willing to stay here. However, the young master's mana is too low now, and if he were to join me hastily, not only would he not be able to control me, he would also be easily suppressed by my spiritual vigor, which is quite inappropriate. That's why I have never acknowledged him as my master." Zhang Yan nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. A killing instrument that was too powerful was not that easy to control, especially the Bao Yang was originally a demonic instrument. If a Xianmen cultivator were to stay with it for a long time, he would definitely be injured, and his spirit would also be weakened. It was only because he had the spirit-packed mysterious technique, and his spirit was extremely condensed that he was not afraid of the spiritual vigor of the Bao Yang. The young general said, "I also know that Jinren has something important to do now. As long as Jinren promises me, when the young master's cultivation is successful in the future, he will return me to him. Every 60 years, I am willing to help Jinren once." Zhang Yan's eyes brightened. This kind of instrument, he had never thought that he would be able to tame it as he wished before he reached the Grotto Heaven realm. Although he summoned it this time, it was just a test, but he was already prepared for the fact that the other party was not willing to follow his orders. With this result, it was a pleasant surprise. After pondering for a while, he said solemnly, "You are a loyal man, I can promise you this." The young general's face revealed a happy expression. He solemnly cupped his fist to Zhang Yan, and then his body turned into a ray of light and entered the embracing sun battle-axe. With a sound, the battle-axe soared up and leaped into Zhang Yan's hand. Zhang Yan smiled and put the battle-axe into his sleeve. After this matter was resolved, he felt that there were no more major matters, so he calmed down and used 3 days of time to properly deal with all the matters in the abode. After that, he leaped up into a streak of light and headed towards the great pool of Dragon Abyss. Not long after, he arrived in front of the Sutra courtyard. After greeting the attendant who came to greet him, he walked straight into the stone tower. In this battle, although he killed Feng Qingping and his methods were not seen through by the demonic sect, he found out that all the supernatural powers that he used at the spell conference, whether it was the demon king Zhu Bogeo or Feng Qingping, they all had a way to counter it. Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided that he needed to find a way to add 1 or 2 tricks to his family. At this stage, he had almost no shortcomings, but in terms of supernatural powers, he felt that there were some places that he could not go as well as he wanted. Among them, the purple cloud thunder was the worst. Although the power of this technique was shocking, it needed a lot of time to charge up. If the opponent had a good escape technique, it was enough to escape. As such, the normal purple cloud thunder did not pose much of a threat to the experts of the demonic sect. Moreover, this technique relied on one's own mana to activate, unlike other supernatural powers that had a compatible technique, which consumed a lot of mana. It was not a big deal during normal times, but during the Xian Demon Great Battle, who knew how many talents of the same generation he would meet, so he could not be careless. There were still 30 years before the battle between the two families. He wanted to use this time to use his own 5 elements technique as the foundation to create a supernatural power that could unleash great power in an instant. This idea was not a whim, but it had been around for a long time. He already had this idea when he was in the Dongshan continent. All along, whenever he had free time, he would try to deduce it. It had been going on and off for more than 100 years. At the moment, this supernatural power was actually more than half completed. However, it was the first time he created a supernatural power, so he felt that it was still lacking. Therefore, he came to the Sutra courtyard to look for the seniors for reference. Chapter 8:16. Zhang Yan stayed in the Jingluo courtyard for several months. It was also thanks to the Qinsong school's vast mysterious gate that he was able to find many enlightening techniques. However, only the 3 upper palace lords had the right to read the various Dao books left behind by the previous generation's cave. He was slightly regretful that he still could not read them. Fortunately, there were many talented people among the Yuanying warriors, so he could be considered to have gained a lot. After he had a plan in mind, he immediately returned to the cave and went into seclusion, using the remnant jade to deduce the technique. Because he had already put in enough effort before, the process was very smooth. It only took him half a year to complete the first technique. In the inner room, Zhang Yan pointed forward. With a rumble, dozens of black lightning bolts burst out and exploded hundreds of feet away. Everywhere they passed, whether it was the cave walls, rocks, or gold and jade utensils, they were all turned into nothingness. With a thought, he waved his sleeve and cast a magic treasure in the air. Then, with a flick of his finger, he used the thunder technique to attack the magic treasure. In less than 3 breaths of time, the magic treasure was struck by hundreds of lightning bolts. Gradually, the magic treasure's light faded and it trembled. Finally, with a crack, it broke into pieces and fell. Following that, he used a few more treasures to test it out. He discovered that this thunder magic was extremely powerful. Ordinary treasures could not withstand it at all. Even profound-level artifacts would not be able to withstand it if they were continuously bombarded by hundreds and thousands of lightning bolts. He did not know if it was because he was proficient in the remnant spirit contract technique, but among them, there were a few magic treasures that he obtained from the Blood Soul Sect's elders that seemed to be particularly weak. Zhang Yan nodded subconsciously. This thunder technique came from the same source as his own mysterious art. Therefore, it could unleash its greatest power, and it could be activated extremely quickly. It could attack in an instant, but its only flaw was that it could not reach far. The further out it went, the weaker its power would be. Beyond 2,000 feet, it was almost impossible to injure the enemy. However, his strength lay in his powerful magic power. If his opponent attacked him from afar, it would be giving up on their strengths and attacking their weaknesses. In order to unleash the magical treasure's divine ability, he would have to find a way to break into the inner circle. At that time, it would be the time for this technique to show its power. He could feel that this divine ability was limited by his own cultivation and knowledge, and was far from perfect. As his cultivation progressed in the future, there was still a lot of room for improvement. He couldn't help but think to himself, this thunder technique is derived from the 5 elements mysterious skill and was created to deal with the devil sect. I might as well call it the lesser 5 elements devil-slaying divine thunder. Although this matter was over, There was still one more matter that needed to be resolved. After trying out the sword formation that he deduced previously, he felt that there were some areas that were not satisfactory and needed to be improved. But right now he was not in a hurry, so he shook his sleeves, got up from the bed and left the room. Jingyu saw him coming out of seclusion and immediately came forward. He addressed him as Master. Zhang Yan asked, "Has the Devil's Doctrine made any unusual movements recently?" Jingyu replied, "Recently, the demon sect's disciples have formed groups of 3 to 5 and kept coming to the small sections. They obstructed the construction of the altar, and other than that, there were no other movements." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. Looking at the situation, it should be that after the Devil's Doctrine's failure last time, they no longer used that fierce method of resistance and instead chose to use the art of harassment. But this did not eliminate the possibility that the other party purposely made such a stance and was secretly waiting for an opportunity to strike. No matter what, as long as his own sect's defense was secure and did not reveal any flaws, they would not be afraid of the other party's attack. So he said in a low voice, "Instruct the Yuyuan tribe's water demons not to relax at all. If there are any mistakes, I will hold them responsible." Jing Yu quickly agreed and said, "There is one more thing that needs to be reported to Master. Half a month ago, Zhenren Zhao from Huanzhen Temple sent a letter saying that he is temporarily staying in Taoist Feng Ming's guest house. If Master is free, why not go over and have a chat?" Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "Show me the letter." Jing Yu quickly took out the letter from his sleeve and bowed as he presented it. Zhang Yan took it in his hands and opened it. He nodded and said, "This is indeed a disciple of Huanzhen Temple. He is very thoughtful." Zhao Hozhou's previous letter was to say that he wanted to fight against the Devil's Doctrine with him. Although he came to Qinsong School this time, he purposely avoided Zhao Yu. It was not because he was arrogant, but because he wanted to guard against the Devil's Doctrine spies. Now that he used the excuse of seeking treasures to stay in Feng Ming's guest house, no one would think that he would join Zhang Yan's sect. Zhang Yan thought that Huanzhen Temple had been fighting against the Devil's Doctrine for a long time. As an elder of Yuaning, Zhao Hozhou must be very familiar with the Devil's Doctrine and should be of help to him. There was no harm in meeting him first, so he said, "Write a letter for me and say that I will visit tomorrow." After taking care of him, he settled some miscellaneous matters and returned to the inner room to meditate and regulate his qi circulation. At the beginning of the second day, he used the sword escape technique and transformed into a ray of rainbow light as he sped towards the great marsh of Dragon Abyss. Doran's abode was on the lone sky island above the great marsh. This place was originally the residence of Elder Sun, but after Doran entered the third degree state, he went to the third upper hall to cultivate and abandon this place. After that, he gave it to his own disciple. In less than half an hour, Zhang Yan arrived in the sky above the island. In front of the abode, someone came out to greet him. Feng Ming wore a tall crown on his head and wore a robe with white wings. He stood at the front, and the person who stood next to him was a middle-aged Taoist. He had tiger eyes and a curly beard. He wore a Taoist robe with crane patterns, and there was a cloud floating on top of his head. He was the cultivator of Huanzhen Temple, Zhao Hozhou. Zhang Yan's eyes swept across, and he stepped on the cloud and floated down. When his body landed, Feng Ming cupped his hands and said loudly, "Senior Zhang, I greet you." Zhang Yan returned the greeting and smiled, "Junior brother Feng, you are too polite." Zhao Hozhou stepped forward and bowed deeply to him. He said apologetically, "I have troubled Zhenren Zhang. I have been rude. I hope Zhenren will forgive me." Zhang Yan was the head of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School and a great cultivator of the third degree state of Yuaning. He was just an ordinary elder on duty at Huanzhen Temple. The difference in their statuses was not small. Moreover, he was the host and a guest. No matter what, he should greet him personally to show respect. But now it was the other way around. Even if there was a reason, it was still a great breach of etiquette. Therefore, he came up to apologize. Zhang Yan smiled, "Taoist Zhao, you are being too serious. I understand your intention. You don't have to worry about some etiquette." After exchanging pleasantries outside, Feng Ming invited him into the abode. After entering, They sat down according to the host and the guest and ordered the servant to serve tea and fruits. The three of them started to talk. First, they talked about some secret anecdotes. Then, they talked about the 6 demon sections. The topic naturally turned to the cultivators under their sections. Zhao Hozhou said, Huanzhen Temple has been fighting with the demon sects for a long time. Sometimes, we would send our disciples to wipe out the demon's den. Therefore, we know a little about them. Feng Ming seemed very interested as he said, there are devil sect cultivators near our Yutsong sect, but most of them hide their heads but show their tails. They don't dare to come out and fight openly, so I don't know much about them. I would like to ask Taoist Zhao. Zhao Hozhou put down the teacup and sat up straight. He said in a deep voice, the 6 demon sects are under the grotto heavens. In terms of Taoist techniques and the ability to fight, I think Yuan Hongyang from the Nether Spring sect is the best. Rumor has it that he has already understood Tao. He is just one step away from the grotto heavens. Feng Ming raised his eyebrows and said in surprise, so powerful? Zhao Hozhou said, of course. Back then. At this point, he suddenly paused as if he had thought of something and looked outside. He wanted to say something but stopped. Zhang Yan could see that he was worried and smiled. Today, there are only the 3 of us here. No one else will hear about it. Taoist Zhao, do you have anything to say? Just say it. Feng Ming also said, the restriction of this cave was set up by my grand ancestor when he was still here. No one will be able to hear it. Taoist Zhao, you don't have to worry. Zhao Hozhou was relieved and said, in my Huanzhen temple, the one with the highest cultivation is senior brother Liang Fengguang. Have the 2 of you heard of him? Feng Ming said, how would I not know? Liang Zhenren has been in the Tao for 800 years. I heard that in your sect, you are one of the few who have inherited the demon-controlling mysterious technique passed down by the founder. Could it be that you have fought with Yuan Hongyang? Zhao Hozhou smiled bitterly and said, that was by accident. Senior brother Liang thought that even if he couldn't win, he would be able to fight to a draw. But after fighting, he realized that he was far weaker than him. He thought that his life would be in danger, but there was another person there. Yuan Hongyang was stopped by him, so he was able to escape. Feng Ming was surprised and said, who is it? Is it a Taoist from Shaoqing sect? Zhang Yan listened attentively. He thought that it was this person who caused Zhao Hozhou to act strangely just now. Zhao Hozhou shook his head and sighed. This person's name is Lu Junyang. He should be from your sect. Lu Junyang? Feng Ming's expression changed and then he sighed, what a pity, what a pity. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he suddenly asked, Taoist Zhao, do you know the result of this battle? Zhao Hozhou paused and then said, according to what senior brother Liang said later, because both sides had their own misgivings, they didn't use their true abilities. But in terms of fighting abilities, both of them were far better than him. Zhang Yan nodded inwardly. This Shinren Liang was the eldest disciple of a sect and had been famous for a long time. He didn't hide his defeat at the hands of others, so he was obviously an open-minded person with a firm Tao heart. His future achievements should be great. He thought again and suddenly had an idea. He said, I want to pay a visit to Shinren Liang. I wonder if Taoist Zhao can introduce me? Zhao Hozhou hurriedly stood up and bowed. This is my honor. The 3 of them chatted for a long time. Zhao Hozhou saw that the 2 of them still had something to say, so he found an excuse and left first. After he left, Feng Ming asked, does senior brother Liang still lack manpower? Zhang Yan looked over and said with a smile, does junior brother Feng have the intention? Feng Ming waved his hand and said, how can I compare to senior brother Liang's talent? I'm only at the 3rd level of the core transformation realm. Even if I want to compete with the devil sect cultivators, I don't have the strength. However, my uncle master's lifespan is coming to an end. He has an unyielding personality and doesn't want to be reincarnated on his deathbed. He only wants to fight with the devil sect cultivators. Elder Sun? Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. Then he smiled and said, this elder is willing to come. I can't ask for more. Do you have any conditions? Feng Ming solemnly cupped his hands and said, If senior brother can enter the palace in the future, I hope you can take care of the Sun family. Zhang Yan understood. Although the Sun family was not an aristocratic family, their ancestor had a grotto heaven Jinren. He was also one of the 12 grotto heavens that followed the former sect leader Qin Qingang to conquer the northern underworld. Their foundation in the sect was also quite deep. If he could get his help in this battle, he could gather many people. This was a matter of mutual benefit. He immediately raised his hands and cupped his hands and said, "Junior brother Feng, please tell Elder Sun that I'll be waiting for you at the clear darkness heavenly lake at any time." Chapter 8:17. In Qinsong School, most of the cultivators were not from the Grotto Heaven sect, but from the side branches. These cultivators, unless they were extremely talented, could reach the first or second level of Yuanying, which was already the peak. Generally speaking, after these people passed away, the best way out for the disciples was to seek protection from the cultivators who had a bright future ahead of them. For example, Elder Zhu's disciples Wang Ziyuan and Yuan Yanhui were like this. In this way, they could borrow a good cave for cultivation, and it was convenient for them to learn superior techniques. Since the Sun clan sought protection from Zhang Yan, many elders in the sect who knew that their future was hopeless also sent letters, expressing their willingness to help. Of course, they would not serve for nothing. Zhang Yan was the head of the top 10 disciples, and if there were no accidents, he would at least become a hall master in the Dujin Hall in the future. At that time, he would need to take care of the younger disciples. Zhang Yan did not reject anyone who was willing to join his sect, and accepted them all. Although the battle of the Xian demons had not yet involved the Taoist Grotto Heaven sect, it was the first time in thousands of years that the two sects had a head-on collision. Even if they had more strength, it would be good. In less than a month, he had gotten more than 10 elders to join him, and the number of people he could use became much more abundant. He believed that on the day of the real battle, it would be close to 20 people. In order to prevent these elders from disobeying his orders, he even went to the floating heavenly palace to ask for a talisman to restrain them. As time passed, the time of the appearance of the Devil's Cave was gradually calculated by those with profound cultivation. The various sects also changed their previous hibernating attitude, and all sent their disciples to other sections. They planned to fight against the Devil's sect together. Qinsong School was one of the 3 major mysterious sects, so naturally, there were emissaries who came to visit. For a while, there was an endless stream of cultivators. As the head of the disciples in the sect, Zhang Yan could send a disciple to deal with ordinary people, but when it came to a few people with honorable status, he had to personally greet them. After all the trivial matters were settled, another year had passed, and he thought that the visit to Liang Fengguang could be delayed. Then he sealed his residence and went into seclusion to study the sword formation. Donghua Continent's Mount Kuanshe. This mountain was located in the boundary of the continent, and it was shaped like an upside-down bowl. The surrounding mountains prostrated, and the surging river flowed around the mountain. This mountain was tens of thousands of feet underground. With the evil earth fire and the filthy qi, ordinary cultivators couldn't come here. However, in the past, a powerful cultivator of the Hunsheng sect had set up a magic altar here for the convenience of the cultivators of the 6 sects of Devil's Doctrine to discuss important matters. At this very moment, an illusory yet majestic spiritual light flew down from above and landed on the altar. After 100 breaths, it stopped just now. A cultivator with eyebrows as white as snow stepped out from the light. He appeared to be 17 or 18 years old. She had a head of white hair, and her face was rosy and radiant. Dressed in a misty rain sky green robe, his feet hovered in the air, half a foot above the ground. His 2 wide robe sleeves hung down, covering nearly half of the altar. After walking 1 round, he waved his sleeves, and the candles that represented the 5 sects on the altar lit up one by one. Then he went to his own seat and sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, not moving. After a short while, a soft halo suddenly appeared in the lantern niche of the Origin Mirage Gate, condensing into a figure. Although it looked blurry, one could vaguely make out that it was a graceful woman. After a few breaths, a coquettish voice came from inside. "Zhenren Huan, I haven't seen you for a long time. How have you been? Zhenren Huan opened his eyes and bowed, saying, Thank you for your concern, Zhenren Wei. Recently, the cave abode has been filled with spiritual opportunity, and with its help, my cultivation has improved a little. Zhenren Wei chuckled, saying, Zhenren Huan, you've improved a lot. I have to congratulate you. Zhenren Huan was about to say a few more polite words, but he saw 3 more light figures floating on the altar. He didn't have time to speak and quickly stood up, saying, Fellow Taoists, I greet you. The 3 light figures also returned the greeting. On the jade seat of Jiuling's sect, there was a tall and thin Taoist inside. He said in a low voice, There are still 3 days before the gathering of the 6 sects next month, but Zhenren Huan has hidden the divine candles and summoned us here at this time. There must be something important? This time, it was Wen Qingxiang from the Blood Soul sect who came in the form of a shadow. He smiled and said, Zhenren Lu, fellow Taoist Li from the Netherworld Spring sect hasn't arrived yet. Why don't we wait for him to arrive before we discuss? Zhenren Lu glanced at him and said nothing. After another moment, there was a sudden sound, and a rainbow light leaped up from the jade seat of the Netherworld Spring sect. After it spread out, it lit up the entire altar, bathing it in light. The 5 of them all turned and bowed to him, saying, Zhenren Li. The figure in the light could only be vaguely seen as a thin figure. He also raised his hand to return the greeting, and finally his gaze fell on Taoist Lu. He said slowly, Taoist Lu, this time fellow Taoist Hibiko Higashi has formed a cave, and I have to congratulate your sect. Taoist Lu hurriedly returned the greeting, saying, Don't mention it. Martial nephew Dong Jin succeeded by luck this time, but it's just a step ahead of all of you. Taoist Li said, Our 6 sects have been suppressed for tens of thousands of years, and our power is far inferior to that of Xianmen. It's our fortune to have another fellow Taoist this time. Taoist Lu bowed slightly and said a few more humble words. Taoist Li then looked at Taoist Huan and said, Taoist Huan, let's talk business. Taoist Huan's expression turned solemn, and he said, I only found out about this yesterday, and because it's extremely important, I had to invite all of you here in advance to discuss it. After a pause, he continued, For the past 10 years, I've used my supernatural power to investigate the spiritual opportunity of the earth veins. After hundreds of calculations, I can already confirm that this time, there isn't 1, but 2 spirit caves. As soon as he said that, everyone present looked surprised. Taoist Lu said in a low voice, Can you confirm this? Taoist Huan said solemnly, This concerns our Xianmen, and we don't dare to joke about it. Ever since everyone arrived, Yuan Ying sect's Taoist Wei had been silent. At this moment he said, I've known Taoist Huan for thousands of years, and his qi guiding technique has never made a mistake. He turned to look at Taoist Li. Taoist Li should know about this as well. Everyone fell into deep thought for a moment. In order to deal with Xianmen during the 3 great tribulations, the 6 sects had been planning for hundreds of years, and they already had a plan. However, with this strange change, it meant that they had to change their previous plans, even if they didn't overturn it. Thus, they were all weighing the pros and cons. Enlightened being Wen's eyes flickered. He looked at the crowd and said loudly, Everyone, from what I see, this is not a bad thing. The celestial gate can at most predict when the spiritual cave will appear. As for whether it will be 1 or 2, we have no way of knowing. Even if there are some variables, in general, it is beneficial to the spiritual gate. Taoist Lu agreed. That's right, it's against common sense for 2 spirit caves to appear at the same time. Even we didn't expect it beforehand. Xianmen doesn't have the supernatural power of Taoist fellow Taoist Hunqing sect, so they'll most likely misjudge the situation. The Devil's Doctrine was generally weaker than the Xianmen. However, the spirit cave was deep underground, so they had the advantage of being the master. If the Xianmen were to attack them head-on, they would have to pay several times the price. That would be enough to cancel out their advantage. However, there was originally only 1 spirit cave. Even if they had made arrangements, the methods they used were limited to those few, and it was hard to say who would win or lose. But now that there was an additional spirit cave, There were many more strategies they could choose from, imperceptibly adding another layer of advantage. Taoist Li pondered for a moment, then said, "This is an important matter, we can't make a decision in a hurry. I need to go back and report to sect master first, then we can make a decision." Except for Taoist Huan, the others all nodded in agreement. Taoist Wei suddenly said, "But now that another spirit cave has appeared, we can have one more disciple to achieve grotto heaven. Who do you all have in mind?" As soon as he said this, everyone quieted down. 4 devil sect cultivators. The biggest opportunity for the appearance of the devil cave was for a 3rd stage cultivator to use the power of the spirit cave to achieve grotto heaven in one go. Logically speaking, 4 devil caves could produce 4 grotto heaven cultivators if there were no Xian men obstructing them. In this way, whether it was against Xian men or against the 3 great tribulations in the future, they would have a higher chance of winning. Originally, the 6 sects had already decided who the disciple would be, but now that there was one more spirit cave, they needed to push forward another person. Seeing that no one spoke for a long time, Wen Qingxiang was the first to break the silence. He said with a smile, "The last person was from my blood soul sect. I think this is a good opportunity. Why don't we give it to our fellow Taoist from the Nether Spring sect? What do you all think?" When the others heard this, they looked at each other, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Taoist Li smiled faintly and said, "I do have a few excellent disciples, but in the past 100 years, the only one who could see through this realm is junior nephew Yuan. However, junior nephew Yuan has comprehended the mysteries, so he doesn't need to use the spirit cave to achieve it. This opportunity will be given to you all." When the other 5 spiritual masters heard this, they all revealed looks of surprise. There were good and bad ways to achieve grotto heaven. If one could achieve it without the help of external objects, there were only a few grotto heaven cultivators in the Donghua continent. Those who could obtain this method were mostly people who had the hope of ascending and breaking through the world in the future. Spiritual Master Huan raised his hands and bowed. He said in admiration, "Your sect is indeed a great sect with 10,000 years of history. Congratulations, Brother Li. Your sect is going to have another great talent." Taoist Li shook his head and said, "Hongyang's talent is rare in the world, but there are many people in the Xian men who are talented and have a good mind. There are many people with amazing talent. Right now, 1 or 2 talents are of no help to the big picture." Spiritual Master Wei snorted and said, "That's because the Xian men have suppressed our spiritual sect for 10,000 years. They have the right time and the right people, and their luck is in their hands." When Qingxiang said in a loud voice, "In the battle 10,000 years ago, our Ling Gate was defeated, so we had no choice but to hide underground. But this time, there are 3 major tribulations, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Everyone should work together to turn the situation around." Everyone nodded and agreed. Spiritual Master Guy of the Bone Yin sect said, "I heard that junior nephew Chao Yu of the Jioling sect is quite talented and has a strong foundation. Why don't we help him achieve it?" But Taoist Lu shook his head and said, "My junior nephew Dong Jin has just achieved grotto heaven, so he won't fight with you for it." Spiritual Master Li thought for a moment and said, "If Spiritual Master Wu Huan doesn't investigate the change of spiritual opportunity, you won't know about it. Why don't we give this opportunity to the disciples of Hunxing sect?" Spiritual Master Wei said faintly, "That's good too." The others didn't have any objections and all expressed their agreement. After this matter was settled, the 6 of them discussed for a while and then retracted their light and shadows. The altar returned to silence. Chapter 8:18. Time flew, and 24 years passed in a blink of an eye. Both Xuanwu and demonic clans were secretly preparing for the appearance of the Devil's Cave. Although there were occasional small conflicts, it was generally peaceful. On the East Sea, a large ship cut through the waves. Wang Kaiwei sat in the cabin and played the zither. The gentle sound of flowing water flowed out from the strings. She was ordered by her master to recruit cultivators in Dongsheng continent. Now that she had completed the task, she returned to Donghua. In Dongsheng continent, because of the Dragon Pillar Assembly and the chaos of the Green Jade Celestial Centipede, The Yuanian cultivators, regardless of whether they were disciples of the major sects or random people, suffered many casualties. Those who were willing to come to Donghua continent were even fewer. She tried hard, but in the end she only found 5 people. However, there was also a pleasant surprise. When Taoist Nun Wei heard about this, she expressed her willingness to come and help. Zhongtai sect was slightly prosperous now, but after all, it occupied most of the North Continent. Because they had to guard against the invasion of the Python tribe, they were short on manpower and could not mobilize many people. However, because of the friendship between the two sects, they sent Du Shixuan, who had the highest level of cultivation in the sect. Together with Tang Jin, Song Chuyuan, Pavilion Master Qian from Quantamin, and their disciples, there were a total of 10 Yuanian cultivators. Wang Kaiwei finished playing and suddenly heard the sound of seagulls mixed with the sound of the waves. She asked, "Where are we now?" A female disciple walked in. Wan Fu said, "Dear, we are almost at Sealed Prayer Island." Wang Kaiwei let out a sigh of relief. After Sealed Prayer Island, they would reach the inland sea. Fortunately, this trip was smooth and did not have many twists and turns. However, when they went out to sea last time, they still saw many demonic cultivators. She did not know if they would run into them this time. She thought about it. She said, "There may be demonic disciples here. Order the people below to be careful." The young girl smiled. "Dear, with so many Zenrins on this ship, the demonic cultivators would not dare to come here." This young girl was Wang Ying, a descendant of a branch of the Wang family. Wang Kaiwei saw that she had the potential to cultivate, so she brought her into the sect and kept her by her side. It could be said that they were half master and half disciple. Thus, when they spoke, they were less apprehensive and more intimate. Wang Kaiwei said, "That's true, but there's no harm in being careful. The spiritual masters of the Dongsheng continent have never seen the methods of the cultivators of the devil sect. Even if they're unharmed, if their disciples get hurt, they'll have to face the consequences. That's not beautiful either." The young girl said, "That's right. My wife is really thoughtful. Disciple will go and pass on the order." When everyone heard that they were about to reach the Donghua continent, they all retreated from their seats. They had been informed beforehand that the mystic and demon clans of the Donghua continent were going to fight. Now that there was no safe place in the continent, everyone was on high alert, ready to guard against any unexpected changes that might occur. Du Shixuan walked to the bow of the boat alone and gazed at the horizon. His trip was not entirely on orders from his sect, but because he had heard that the Dongsheng continent was blessed by the heavens. Located in the 9 continents, there were many cultivation sections. The cultivators of this continent were far superior to the other continents in terms of cultivation experience, supernatural powers, and Taoist techniques. He yearned for this place and volunteered to come. However, he was also a proud person. Back then, after he was defeated at the Battle of the Dragon Pillars, he went back and painstakingly cultivated and honed his skills. After that, he went around looking for people to fight. He knew that he was no longer who he was in the past. Even if he had to fight with Rong Juanzhong again, he was confident that he could win. Thus, he was extremely eager to fight with the cultivators of the Donghua continent to see how far his own sect had progressed. At this moment, he saw an island in the shape of a half-moon floating in front of him. Even from a great distance, he could feel the spiritual vigor within it. It was obvious that there was a formation set up. The people on the island seemed to have noticed the arrival of the boat. A spirit suddenly appeared, and a cultivator in white stepped out of the mist. His face was full of vigilance. He observed for a while and saw that the chi dynamic on the boat seemed to be first-rate from the mystic sect. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. He moved closer and asked carefully, "May I know which Taoist is coming from the other side?" Du Shixuan looked at him with a sharp gaze and asked in reply, "Who are you?" The person saw that he had an extraordinary bearing and a high cultivation experience, so he cupped his hands and said, "I am Heyin, the disciple of Pringyuan. I am guarding this island under the orders of my sect." When Du Shixuan came, he roughly inquired about the Dongsheng continent, but he only paid attention to the cultivators of the same generation from the 10 sects of the mystic sect and the 6 sects of the demon path. When he heard the name of Prenuan sect, it seemed that it was not well known, so he immediately lost interest. The disciple observed his expression and knew that he was not in the mood to talk to him anymore. He didn't dare to inquire further and cupped his hands in greeting. Just as he was about to leave, a delicate voice came from behind. "Are you a fellow Taoist from Prenuan sect?" He looked back and saw a girl in colorful clothes with exquisite facial features. He cupped his hands and said, "May I know how to address you, fellow Taoist?" Wang Ying bowed and said, "I am from Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake." Yin was shocked and revealed a respectful expression. He hurriedly returned the greeting and said, "So you are from Taoist Zhang's sect. Sorry for the offense." Wang Ying asked, "This Taoist, when I went out to sea with my wife, Sealed Prayer Island was alone on the sea. There was no help on all sides and no trace of anyone. Why did you set up a formation now? Could it be that you are not afraid of the cultivators of the demon path attacking?" Yin smiled and said, "This wife is talking about something that happened 20 years ago. The reason for this has something to do with your sect. In the past, Taoist Zhang had ordered to set up a spell altar in the river basin, forcing the cultivators of the demon path to have no choice but to send their disciples to deal with it. Thus, the Eastern Sea has become much more peaceful. The two sects have not fought each other for many years. My sect also has the spare power to set up spell altars and formations on the various islands so that it is convenient to go out and search for cultivation materials." Wang Ying suddenly said, "I see. Thank you, Senior Martial Brother, for dispelling my doubts." Yin hurriedly said, "What are you saying? Fellow Taoist can rest assured this time. There will be no obstacles in front of you." After the two of them exchanged a few more words, Yin cupped his hands and left the boat. He stepped on his Dan Sha and returned to the island. Just now when the two of them were talking, Taoist Nun Wei was standing not far away. Because Yin's cultivation was low, she did not pay much attention to him. At this moment, she casually glanced at him and saw his escape light. Her expression was slightly strange. She stared at him for a while and could not help but feel puzzled. She thought to herself, "Strange. Why is this Prenuan sect's cultivation method similar to my Shao Tsung realms?" Yin flew for more than 10 miles. Suddenly he felt a pain in his chest. Then, his eyes became confused and he stood there in a daze. After a while, like a marionette, he took out a flying letter from his bosom. Using his finger as a pen, he used his mana to condense the characters. In a moment, the letter was completed and he sent it to the sky. After doing all this, he shuddered as if he had just woken up from a dream. He looked around and thought to himself, "Strange. Why am I in a daze?" Shaking his head, he used his escape technique and sped up, going back the way he came. After the flying letter left the East Sea, it flew all the way into the hinterland of the Donghua continent. In the end, it was thrown into the depths of a cave. An hour later, it landed in a cave. Coincidentally, there were 2 people playing chess at this time. One of the handsome cultivators noticed it and raised his hand to catch it. Sitting opposite him was a young man with a high nose and deep eyes. When he saw it, his eyes lit up and he said, "It's a letter from Hongyu. I haven't seen it in a long time. Senior Martial Brother Chao, quickly open it and take a look." Taoist Chao did not listen to him. He put down the chess piece unhurriedly and opened the letter. After reading it once, he did not say anything for a long time. The young man's heart was itching. He could not help but ask again, "Senior Martial Brother Chao, what does the letter say?" Taoist Chao kept the letter and said leisurely, "A disciple of Zhang Yan has returned from another continent. This time, he seems to have brought along a few Yuanning cultivators. In order to make it easier for him to investigate the movements of Xianmen, he had secretly planted divine arts on the cultivators of many sections. This art was passed down in the Jiuling sect, and the most amazing thing about it was that the cultivators were not aware that they had been planted with Taoist arts. Although as time passed, they would reveal their flaws and many had been caught, there were still some spies that had not been seen through yet. That Yin was one of them. Back then, When Dragon Country's great ship set out to sea, he had secretly paid attention to it. Now, he had received news of the other party's return. The young man was stunned. He then stood up excitedly and said, "Senior Marshal Brother, if you rush over now, you will be able to catch all of them in one fell swoop." Taoist Chao shook his head slowly. The young man said anxiously, "Our spirit sect has suffered great losses at the hands of Zhang Yan time and time again. If you are able to regain your dignity this time around, your reputation within the six sects will definitely increase tremendously. At that time, the person who makes use of the spirit cave to achieve success might very well be you, Senior Marshal Brother." Taoist Chao was still unmoved. He said calmly, "How could a disciple of Zhang Yan not send a letter to the sect when he returns? Even if Zhang Yan doesn't come himself, he will still send someone to receive him. He might even be waiting at the side, waiting for our spirit sect's disciples to go over." The young man encouraged, "Senior Marshal Brother, what if they are careless? Wouldn't I be the chance that we are waiting for?" Taoist Chao reprimanded, "Nonsense. This is a matter of life and death. How can you think about getting lucky?" The young man was still indignant. "Are we just going to give up just like that?" Taoist Chao sneered. "Do we, Jiuling sect cultivators, need to put ourselves in danger when doing things? We can just spread out the contents of the letter. As for how we should proceed, we can leave it to our fellow Taoists to decide." The young man's eyes lit up, and he clapped his fists together, saying, "Senior Marshal Brother, this is a brilliant plan. Let others scout the way for us, then we can sit back and reap the benefits." Taoist Chao said seriously, "I've already said that I won't go this time around." The young man looked at his expression, and it didn't seem like he was faking it. He couldn't help but reveal a look of disappointment, sighing, "What a pity." Taoist Chao frowned, saying, "Junior Marshal Brother, playing with schemes isn't the right way to go. This time around, our fellow Taoists have succeeded. As the person who delivered the message, how can I not get the credit? On the other hand, while scheming against our fellow Taoists will give us a temporary advantage, we will offend them, and misfortune will inevitably befall us in the future." East Flower Continent, Clear Darkness Heavenly Lake. Zhang Yan's seclusion this time was to polish the Divine Light Single Chi Sword Formation. Now that more than 20 years had passed, this sword formation had already reached the point where it could be activated with a flick of a finger. If it wasn't someone with profound cultivation, it would be extremely difficult to discern its origin. Although he felt that this technique hadn't been perfected yet, and if he continued to study it, there would be further improvement. But because the day of the Devil's Cave's appearance was approaching, Qin Song, Shaoqing, and Yu Xiao had agreed to each send a person in charge to Mount Fenglai to discuss this matter. Now that he calculated the time, it was almost time for him to come out. Jing Yu had been waiting outside the door these days. Seeing him come out, he hurriedly went forward and bowed, saying, "Master, Madame Wang has returned from Dongsheng. According to Master's previous arrangements, Jinren Han has already gone to receive her." Zhang Yan nodded, saying, "It's about time. With Senior Marshal Brother receiving her, there shouldn't be a problem. These few days, I need to go to Mount Fenglai to attend the meeting of the three sects, so I won't be in the manor. I've ordered Yen Yi to help me greet our fellow Taoists from Dongsheng." Chapter 8:19. Mount Fenglai was located in the middle of Donghuaqing River. It used to be the mountain gate of Hongha Monastery, a great sect of Xianmen. In the past, this sect was also mentioned in the Sword Fighting Talisman book. However, this sect had already declined over 6,000 years ago. Because the spiritual opportunity of the earth vein was destroyed, no one occupied this place anymore. What used to be an important place was now only a pile of broken tiles and walls. A few days ago, cultivators from Shaoqing, Qinsong, and Yuxiao sects came one after another. They slightly repaired the temple on the mountain and set up a restrictive formation within 100 miles. It looked like it was to prevent outsiders from spying on them, but it was actually just a formality. The people in charge of the three sects gathered together to discuss matters. With Taoist Dong Tian watching from behind, the cultivators from the demon sects naturally wouldn't come here to cause trouble. The first person from the Insang sect was the Purple Light Academy's elder Hu Jie. He was talking to the Shaoqing Academy's elder Duan. The two of them had met several times when they were training outside when they were young, so they could be considered as old acquaintances. Hence, they had a pleasant conversation. As for the Yuxiao school's elder, he was located far away in the south and rarely interacted with other sections. Thus, when they saw him, they only greeted him and didn't talk too much with him. Although Hu Jie was talking, he didn't forget to be vigilant of his surroundings. Suddenly, he sensed something and turned his head to look. He saw a dozen rays of light flying around outside the restrictive formation. He couldn't help but ask, "Who are they?" Elder Duan stroked his beard and carefully identified them. He said, "Look at the rays of light, they seem to be from Primordial Yang sect." Hu Jie frowned. "What are Primordial Yang cultivators doing here?" Elder Duan smiled. Primordial Yang sect's mountain gate isn't far from here. They consider themselves to be the host here. Since the guests are here, why wouldn't the master come? Hu Jie said with slight mockery, "Primordial Yang sect's fellow Taoist, you sure are arrogant." Elder Duan Daoren said, "For tens of thousands of years, only our three sects have been able to survive. However, the three great tribulations are happening right now. Even Grotto Heaven's people might not be able to protect themselves. Primordial Yang sect might still want to break out of this situation." Hu Jie sneered and said, "Let's see who will have the last laugh." The two of them didn't pay any attention to those Yuan Yang disciples. They continued to chat and laugh. Soon, it was the first quarter of the morning. Suddenly, a streak of golden clouds appeared on the horizon, as if thousands of stars had appeared. After flashing for only a moment, they suddenly condensed into a line and transformed into a sword rainbow, flying through the air with the speed of lightning. Elder Duan stroked his beard and said, "It's Reverend Ran." With a wave of his hand, the restrictive door of the mountain was opened. The streak of light arrived in front of the mountain in a moment and turned to shoot down. They landed on the peak and scattered. Ran Xiushu walked out from within, and the specks of starlight leaped for a moment before combining into a sword pellet and flying into the heart of his brows. The Shaoqing disciples did not like to be restrained, and they usually went out. If it wasn't necessary, he would always swing his sword back and forth freely. This time, he didn't bring any disciples with him and came alone. The deacons of the three sects saw it. They all came forward and bowed. Hu Jie said, "Jinren Zhang hasn't arrived yet. Jinren Ran, please wait a moment." Yu Xiao's surname was Xie. The elder said, "My sect's Jinren is also on the way." Ran Xiushu waved his sleeve and smiled. "You don't have to say that. I've arrived early this time." There were a total of 3 white jade thrones on the altar, which corresponded to the 3 sections. He took a glance, then walked to the west seat and sat down, meditating on his own. About a moment later, the roar of a flood dragon could be heard from the horizon, accompanied by the faint sound of thunder. Then, the clouds in the sky churned, and a carriage with 2 flood dragons came from the north. The 2 inky flood dragons swayed their heads and tails in the clouds as they moved forward. Hu Jie took a few steps forward and said joyfully, "It's my sect's Reverend Zhang." He waved his hand, and a disciple beside him removed the restriction. Not long after, the flood dragon carriage arrived and descended towards the mountain peak. The 2 flood dragons stomped on the ground, and with a loud bang, the 3 of them felt the ground beneath their feet tremble. Zhang Yan got off the carriage and greeted Hu Jie and the others first. Then, he swept his gaze across and bowed. "I didn't expect Taoist Ran to arrive before me." Ran Xiushu returned the greeting and said, "I'm just a moment early." Zhang Yan smiled faintly, walked over, and sat down on the northern seat. Ran Xiushu said, "It's been almost 30 years since we last met. I wonder if you've made any progress in the path of the sword after returning to your sect?" Zhang Yan smiled. "I dare not say, but I've deduced a sword formation on my own after returning to my sect." Ran Xiushu's eyes lit up, and she immediately became interested. "With your talent, the method you've created must be extraordinary. May I have a look?" Zhang Yan nodded. "I was just about to ask. This sword formation wasn't a life-saving technique, but a supplementary one. He wasn't afraid of others seeing it. Moreover, Ran Xiushu was far above him in terms of cultivation in the path of the sword. With her foresight, she might even be able to point out some flaws, which was why she was willing to show it. He said, "Excuse me." Then he raised his finger and drew across the air. Suddenly, a sword light appeared and disappeared. Both his drawing and sheathing of his sword were extremely fast. It only took an instant, but Ran Xiushu had already seen through the gist of it. After pondering for a while, he said, "Fellow Taoist, compared to my fellow disciples, this sword formation lacks a murderous spirit. However, it has hidden tricks. I believe it's used to trap people, right?" Zhang Yan said, "Taoist Ran's eyes are like torches. This is I's original intention." Ran Xiushu evaluated. This sword formation is formed by 108 sword lights. It's almost maximized its power, but it also exhausted its sword path. If it was someone from my Shaoqing sect, they wouldn't do this. They would definitely leave a few moves for backup. Otherwise, if something unexpected happens, they won't be able to defend themselves. However, Taoist Ran isn't a sword cultivator, so you don't have to adhere to this rule. I can't see anything wrong with it, so I have a few words for you. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Please go ahead, Taoist Ran." Ran Xiushu smiled and said, "Sword formations pay particular attention to the combination of strange and right. This saying can also be applied to sword formations. Why don't you study it carefully?" Zhang Yan thought for a while and nodded. "I've learned something." The two of them talked for about an hour. At this moment, the rumbling of clouds and chi explosions came from the sky, causing everyone in the mountain to look up. They saw a 3-mile-long flaming wind cloud raft flying over from the south. At the front of the raft stood a scholar wearing a silk scarf. He wore a long green robe without any accessories, and his movements were natural and unrestrained. He was smiling from ear to ear, and behind him were more than 100 servants of the 10 strong warriors. Each of them held a magic tool in their hands, and there were 2 similar-looking female cultivators standing on the left and right. Both of them seemed to be in the Yuanying realm. Elder Xie from the Yuxiao school hurriedly came forward and bowed. He seemed to say something, and the person waved his hand and sent him away. Then he turned around and gave some instructions to the people behind him before getting off the cloud raft alone. He rode on the astral winds and went into the mountain alone. After a while, he floated down from the Dharma seat and walked over quickly. He cupped his hands at Zhang and ran. "I hope the two of you can forgive me. I'm late." This person was called Wu Fenggu, and he was a disciple of the Wu clan. The Yuxiao school was controlled by the Zhou and Wu clans. During the previous sword duel, the Zhou clan was the one in charge, but the Wu clan was the one in charge this time. Zhang and Ran both stood up and returned the greeting. Ran Xiushu smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Wu, you're too kind. The duel was originally set to be at 6 in the morning, but you're not late." After the 3 of them exchanged a few more pleasantries, they sat down respectively. Ran Xiushu got straight to the point without beating around the bush. She said, "Today, our 3 sects have gathered to deal with the battle of the mystic demons. I wonder how many people the 2 of you can deploy this time?" Wu Fenggu straightened his body and said, "This time, our Wu clan has sent out 3 clan elders. Including myself, there are a total of 4 stage 3 cultivators. Additionally, there are 32 patrol elders. If the enemy is strong, we can add more people." There was no master-disciple inheritance in the Yuxiao school, so the aristocratic families had a deep foundation. The Zhou clan wouldn't participate in the Battle of the Devil Cave this time, so the Wu clan would send out their forces. Ran Xiushu nodded and said, "Shaoqing's 3 branches will each send 1 person. Including me, there will be 4 third-stage Yuanying cultivators and 12 Yuanying elders." This number was far less than Yu Zhao's, but when Wu Fenggu heard it, he didn't look down on it at all. The Shaoqing sect had no more than 200 true teachings disciples, and these people were all sword cultivators, and each of them could fight one against many. At this moment, Ran and Wu both looked at Zhang Yan. They knew that he wasn't a disciple of the Grotto Heaven, and the elders in the sect weren't under his command. Presumably, he wouldn't be able to deploy many people this time. However, as one of the 10 heads, he could always deploy his 10 disciples, and with the addition of his own disciples, he should be able to handle the situation. Zhang Yan met their gazes and said calmly, I have 3 third-stage cultivators by my side. Inside and outside the sect, there are about 20 Yuanian cultivators who can be used. In addition, there are 16 fourth transformation strength path cultivators from the northern underworld's Yuyuan tribe. On the day of the battle, there might be more. When the two heard this, they were greatly surprised. This strength could only be stronger than theirs, not weaker. Especially the 16 demon tribe elders. In normal times, it wouldn't be a big deal, but the Devil's Cave was deep underground, and it wasn't easy to travel there. This time, Taoist sect was the active party, so they had to attack forcefully. These thick-skinned demon cultivators could play a greater role. Looking at Zhang Yan's calm expression, the two couldn't help but admire him. He didn't have the support of the enlightened master of the Grotto Heaven, but he could rely on his own ability to develop such strength. It was really impressive. Ran Xiushu sighed and continued, since each sect has enough people, I won't say more. The day the Devil's Cave will appear should be in a few years, but we still don't know where it will appear. But recently, the earth veins in the west of East Flower Continent are flourishing, which is a sign that the Devil's Cave should be here. Zhang Yan smiled and said, the west of the Great Pool of Dragon Lake has also seen the same movement. Wu Fenggu said in surprise, oh? What a coincidence in my Yuxiao's territory. As he spoke, he suddenly realized something. His eyes narrowed and he said doubtfully, wait, could it be that this person is deliberately setting up a trap? Ran Xiushu said in a deep voice, that must be it. I heard that there are similar movements near the Nanhua sect. If the spiritual vigor in the earth veins is guided by the enlightened master of the Grotto Heaven, although they can't really point out the spirit point, it's not difficult to pass off the fake as the real one. Wu Fenggu raised his brows and said, if that's the case, once the Devil's Cave appears, I'm afraid there will be more than one place. Won't it be difficult to distinguish the real from the fake? Ran Xiushu said with confidence, in the current situation, we are still strong while the enemy is weak. If we Taoist sect gather our forces and attack, the Devil's sect will definitely not be able to resist. It's not strange at all for them to create such a scene, but they want to disperse our strength. Zhang Yan said calmly, whether it's real or fake, we can only first clean up our own territory before we can think of other places. Ran Xiushu cheered, Taoist Zhang is right. We must not let the Devil's sect disrupt our formation. Among the 10 Taoist sects of East Flower Continent, even if 3 of us are temporarily held up, the other 7 sects will not sit idly by. There's no need to guess where the real Devil's Cave is, we just need to suppress it one by one. Chapter 820. Blood Soul Sect, Myriad Spirit Cliff, Rainbow Sky Cloud Cave. Bailey Qingyin calmly stepped into the cave hall. This place was vast and spacious, enough to accommodate more than 10,000 people preaching. On the high stone platform, there were 4 Taoists sitting upright. Behind them, there was spiritual energy spilling out, like silk ribbons hanging down and changing from time to time. Below the platform, he bowed and said, Disciple pays respect to the 4 spiritual masters. One of the Taoists was handsome, with long cheeks and a wide forehead. The top of his head was flowing with red light, as bright as the sun, reflecting the sky. He said slowly, Bailey Qingyin. Bailey Qing didn't dare to raise his head, and only replied, Disciple is here. The Taoist said, How are the preparations for you guarding the spirit cave? Bailey Qingyin replied, Disciple has arranged everything properly. When Qingxiang sat on the lower left side of the Taoist. At this time, he smiled and said, Qing, just now, fellow Taoist from Huncheng sect sent a message saying that the spirit cave has appeared. When Bailey Qingyin heard this, his expression immediately turned solemn. He knew that once the spirit cave appeared, it meant that Xianmen would no longer maintain the previous restraint. Between the 2 sects, there would immediately be a storm of blood. When Qingxiang continued, You probably don't know, this time there are two spirit caves appearing. When Bailey Qingyin heard this news, he was also surprised, but he quickly calmed down and made a quick judgment. This situation was advantageous to his side. His eyes flashed and he asked, "May I ask Spiritual Master Wen, where are the two spirit caves?" When Qingxiang said, "One is in the north of Donghua, close to our Blood Soul sect, and the other is not far from Hunqing sect." On the right side of the seat, a fairy-like female Taoist with cinnabar on her forehead sat alone. At this time, she said lightly, "This time, fellow Taoist Hunqing is in a favorable position." Bailey Qingyin cautiously suggested, "Spiritual Master, since we already know the location of the two spirit caves, can we protect them within a forbidden formation?" But when Qingxiang shook his head and rejected the idea, saying, "Although we know the general location, the boundary is about 10,000 miles in circumference. If we want to set up a forbidden formation in this area, it is not something that can be done in a short period of time. Even if we really do it, we will definitely not be able to hide it from Shenmen. This time, we can only wait for the spirit cave to truly appear. Just now, we can make our move." Bailey Qingyin sighed slightly. It was a pity to miss this opportunity. If they could set up a great formation before the Celestial Sect of Wonders noticed it, then even if there were 10 times more people, they would not be afraid. And they could wait for the Celestial Sect of Wonders to exhaust its vitality. As for a head-on clash, even if they had the advantage of terrain, it would still be a bitter battle. When Qingxiang smiled and said, "You don't have to sigh. The 6 sects have a plan. This time, the Zenrens of all sects will work together to guide the earth qi and spirit veins to create 3 virtual acupoints in the continent. Using this to confuse the real with the fake, to weaken the strength of the Celestial Sect of Wonders." Bailey Qingyin was well aware that he was merely a relatively important chess piece in the clash between the profound and spirit families. He didn't have the power to make his own decisions, so he said in a low voice, "Then what should this disciple do?" When Qingxiang said, 3 virtual acupoints, 1 each in the north, west, and south. The west will be handed over to the fellow Taoist of the Nether Spring sect, with Yuan Hongyang blocking Qingchenzi of the Shaoqing sect. In the south, Chao Yu of the Jiuling sect will block Wu Fenggu of the Yuxiao school. As for the north, he looked down. The responsibility of blocking Qinsong's school naturally falls on you, Bailey Qing. Bailey Qingyin's gaze was solemn. He said in his heart, "Zhang Yan." Different from other places, the spirit cave he needed to guard was a true acupoint. It could be said that it was very close to Qinsong's school. Then there would definitely be a large-scale attack, and there wouldn't be much time left for him to prepare. It was also unknown how many Blood Soul sect disciples would die in this battle. The Taoist on the main seat spoke again at this time. "You are the eldest disciple of this generation in the sect. The loss of Feng Qingping cannot be repeated. Do you understand?" Bailey Qing suddenly raised his head, bowed, and said, "This disciple will not let down the sect's great trust." The Taoist was expressionless and only said, "Junior apprentice brother Wen, you tell him what to do next." When he finished, he flicked his sleeves and instantly turned into a stream of rainbow light like a waterfall, rumbling and rising up to the top of the spirit cliff. The other 2 spiritual masters also stood up, and after a few words of encouragement, they disappeared one after another. After the 3 left, when Qingxiang's expression became gentler, and he said, "Qing, it is best if you can protect this spirit cave of the north. If you can't, you can abandon it." Bailey Qingyin was very surprised. The sect originally wanted him to use the opportunity of the spirit cave appearing to form a grotto heaven, and this had long been decided. But if he let it go, not only would he miss this great opportunity, but it would also go against the original intentions of the spiritual masters. He didn't think that when Qingxiang would say so. When Qingxiang said sincerely, "You must have heard recently that Yuan Hongyang of the Nether Spring sect has cultivated to the point where he can form a grotto heaven without the help of external objects. Your talent is not worse than this person, and you still have nearly 300 years to live. If you can understand the true mystery in this period of time, the Blood Soul sect will not lose to Nether Spring too much in the future." The battle between our two sects will last for thousands of years, and it is not about a moment of victory or defeat. You need to remember that the most important thing this time is to protect yourself. If you see that the situation is not right, let it go early. Don't pester it for a little face. Even if spiritual Master Nye blames you, I will do my best to explain for you. There was a sense of eagerness in his words. When the two sects collided, it was no longer just about the individual strength of the cultivators, it was about the foundation of the sects, to see who could withstand the consumption more. Although the spirit gate showed a little signs of rising, compared to the Shenmen, it was still not as good. But this situation would change as time dragged on. It could be said that the longer it dragged on, the more advantageous it was for his side. Therefore, he was not willing to use a disciple with a bright future to compete with the Shenmen, and thought that it was worth it even if they had to give up a spirit cave. Bailey Qingyin bowed deeply and said loudly, "Qingyin will remember the spiritual master's instructions." When Qingxiang looked at him and sighed slightly, saying, "I hope you really remember." After the meeting at Mount Fenglai, Zhang Yan returned to the cave abode and met with the group of cultivators from Dongsheng continent. After greeting them one by one, he ordered the disciples to bring them to the cave abode for the night and set down the rules that they were not to go out at will for a few years. They could only cultivate in the cave abode, but the items they needed for cultivation would not be lacking in the clear serenity heavenly lake. Everyone came to Donghua for the first time and saw the majestic atmosphere of the Qinsong school. They were all shocked and did not dare to have any objections to his arrangements. Because they knew that the situation this time was dangerous, and life and death were not in their control, they entered the cave abode. Everyone, including Taoist Nun Wei, cultivated with all their might. They hoped to improve their skills a little more before the battle. After a few months, Jing Yu suddenly walked into the cave abode with a happy expression on his face. He held a letter in his hand and said, "Master, there is a letter from Linqing Monastery." Wang Ziyuan and Yuan Yanhui, the two Taoist masters, broke through a few days ago and entered the Yuaning realm. Oh! A glimmer appeared in Zhang Yan's eyes and he took the letter. He knew that Wang and Yuan Yanhui's talents were outstanding. During the internal competition, these two were only ranked behind Lu Yeni. It was not surprising that they could enter the Yuaning realm. He originally thought that before the Devil's Cave appeared, only one of them would be able to enter this realm. He did not expect that both of them would succeed. These two were not like the elders. They were disciples of Zhaoyu sect and did not need to worry about using them. This undoubtedly added two more helpers to the Zhaoyu heavenly lake. He thought for a moment and said, "It is no longer appropriate for the two of them to stay outside. Write a letter on my behalf and summon them back. Choose another disciple to guard Linqing Monastery." Jing Yu bowed and said, "I will do it now." Zhang Yan pondered and said, "Tian Kuan and Kai Ting have been training outside for many years. Recently, the earth qi and spiritual opportunity in Donghua continent have been moving strangely. I think the Devil's Cave will appear soon. It is time to summon them back." At that moment, he felt something in his heart. He did not move and just used his Xian Qi. He turned into a ray of light and went out of the cave abode. He arrived above the Zhaoyu heavenly lake. There was a flying boat hovering in midair, with a boy standing on it. Seeing him come out, he threw the token in his hand and said, "Zhenren Zhang, take it. The sect leader has a decree for you to head to the floating heavenly palace." Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and took the token. His thoughts changed. The sect leader rarely sent someone to summon him, so something big must have happened. Thus, he didn't waste any time. He called out to the boy and flew up on his sword. He turned into a beam of light and flew up into the sky. Not long later, he arrived below the floating heavenly palace and took out the token. He used his mana and a rainbow wrapped around his body, sending him inside. Moments later, he landed in front of a large hall. After being informed by a deacon, he stepped inside. When he arrived at the main hall, he saw the sect leaders sitting on a platform. Meng, Shen, and Sun Zhenren were also seated. His eyes flashed and he went forward to greet them. After greeting them one by one, sect leader Qin swept his horsetail whisk and a ray of light fell. He said, "Take it first." Zhang Yan took it and held it in front of him. He saw that it was a letter. He opened it and raised his eyebrows. 5 Devil's Caves? Sun Jinren mocked. Not just that. Our 3 sects each have one. It is just as we expected. The people of the demon sect only have these tricks up their sleeves. Shen Baishuang's gaze was like lightning. He shot over and said, Zhang Yan, with your current strength, can you take down the Devil's Cave near Qinsong School? Zhang Yan put down the letter and said calmly, since it is in the north, the demon sect will definitely not have the time to set up a defensive formation. If there are no changes, I will use all my strength to take it down. Mengjin said slowly, what if I ask you to help other places? Do you still have strength left? Zhang Yan knew that this was not a random question. Although there was a devil's den in his own mountain, it might not be true. It was very likely that it was released by the devil's doctrine to restrain the Black Song sect. Perhaps when the time came to conquer it, they would have to fight elsewhere. He thought for a moment, then cupped his hands and said, if that's the case, I'll be so bold as to ask the mountain for help. Sun Jinren slammed the table in front of him and laughed. That's right. You are a disciple of Qinsong. If you don't ask for help from the sect, who will you ask for help from? Zhang Yan, ever since you returned to the sect, you have repeatedly defeated the demon sect. The sect has yet to reward you. Today I, Sun Jinren, will go beyond my duties and give you something. Keep it well. When he finished, he raised his hand. Before Zhang Yan could see it clearly, something appeared in his sleeve. At the same time, a voice said in his ear, there is no need to take it out now. You can look at it when you go back. His heart moved. He didn't look at it carefully and kept it in his sleeve. Mengjin stroked his beard. The last time you met Sect Master, you said that you needed a few fixed talisman. I have made a few of them. You can come and get them later. Shen Baishuang was even more direct. He waved his hand and a ray of light shone down. This treasure is called Murky Light Mirror. It can see through illusions and see through the truth. Today, I will lend it to you. If you can break through the Devil's Cave, you don't have to return it. Chapter 821. After Zhang Yan accepted Shen Baishuang's magic treasures, he cupped his hands and said, thank you, 3 Jinren. On the high platform, sect leader Qin said warmly, Zhang Yan, if this trip goes smoothly, when you return, the position of the palace of Du Zhen's side hall master can be handed over to you. Zhang Yan's expression was slightly solemn. He said in a deep voice, disciple will do my best. Sect leader Qin nodded and said, today I will bestow you with 3 divine talismans to protect your life. I hope you will make good use of them. He waved his horsetail whisk. 3 glowing jade talisman flew up from the table and floated down. Zhang Yan caught it in his hand and immediately felt a rich spiritual vigor coming from it. He knew it was a good thing, so he put it away and bowed to the people above. Thank you, sect leader, for your generous gift. Sect leader Qin didn't say anything more. He waved his horsetail whisk lightly and left the table. The boy behind him hurriedly followed. After a few steps, his figure disappeared into the back of the hall. Mengjin said to Zhang Yan, follow me. After saying that, he waved his big sleeve and walked out of the hall. Zhang Yan got up and hurried to catch up. When he reached the outside of the hall, he saw a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. A monstrous turbid wave rose up and flowed down to the great pool of Dragon Abyss. The turbid wave surged over. He only felt his body lighten and was pushed down by the wave. After an unknown amount of time, his feet sank, his gaze swept left and right. He saw that he had landed on a floating island, outside the vast expanse of water, empty and vast, deep and wide pool, the waves rippling. He couldn't see the end of it. Right in front of him was shrouded in fog and clouds. He could vaguely see a stone staircase winding up. He could hear the indistinct sound of the waterfall, but Mengjin's shadow was already nowhere to be seen. Zhang Yan's heart stirred, and he thought, could this be the cave that Mengjin lives in, the righteous virtue great lofty heavenly abode? He had once heard that this abode was opened up by Mengjin with great power and was used for cultivation. Very few people could enter this abode. The disciples of the sect had only heard that there was such a place in the depths of the great pool of Dragon Abyss, but they did not know its exact location. He never thought that he would be able to see its true appearance today. He walked up the stone steps. Not more than 100 steps later, he arrived at a jade platform with a pattern of longitude and latitude engraved on it. He saw Mengjin was sitting on the altar, with 2 jade plates on the table in front of him. As soon as Mengjin came up, he said, "These 2 things are for you. One is the talisman that you need. Secondly, there are more than 300 spirit-protecting talismans. You can distribute them to your disciples. If they die in battle, they can protect their primordial spirit and help them enter the Tao in the future." Zhang Yan had also seen this item when he was challenging the 4 beasts formation, so he didn't stand on ceremony. After he bowed, he went up and kept the 2 items. Mengjin said, "Zhang Yan, you have always done things calmly, so I won't say anything unnecessary. I just hope that you will serve the sect well. Now that you have returned, you will have a bright future. That's all I have to say. You can go now." After he finished speaking, he waved his sleeves. Zhang Yan suddenly felt boundless spiritual vigor surging towards him, then the scenery in front of him changed. After he stabilized his body, he realized that he was already above the great pool of Dragon Abyss. He stood still in midair for a moment, then he stepped on the ground. Riding on the strong wind, he turned around and walked towards the pill tripod courtyard. He moved very quickly, and in less than a moment, he arrived in front of the fish boat. He said outside, "Is senior brother here?" In just a few breaths, Zhou Chongju lifted the curtain and came out. He said in surprise, "Junior brother, you're here? You're here. Come in and sit." He invited Zhang Yan in, and the 2 of them sat down in the cabin. Zhou Chongju smiled and said, "I originally wanted to send someone to call junior brother here. Since you're here today, there's no need to waste so much effort." Zhang Yan was surprised and said, "Senior brother, you're looking for me?" Zhou Chongju waved his hand and said, "It's not a big deal. It's just that I heard that you're going to lead the people to fight against the devil's doctrine, and I can't help you much. This time, I've specially refined more than 1,000 bottles of pills for junior brother. They can replenish your essence and speed up your cultivation. Take them all." He took out a jade box and pushed it in front of Zhang Yan. Then, he solemnly took out a bottle from his sleeves and said, "This pill is called the soul-restoring pill. Because precious materials are hard to find, and because medicine is hard to make, I've only refined 7 pills in the past hundreds of years. Even if your body is half damaged, as long as your primordial spirit is still there, you can be saved in a few hours." Zhang Yan's expression changed, and with a wave of his sleeves, he kept the bottle and said, "I won't stand on ceremony with senior brother." In reality, in an intense battle, if one was heavily injured, then they would be at the mercy of others. Even if they took this pill, the chances of them escaping danger were very small. However, if they changed the way they were used, it might have a miraculous effect. Zhou Chongju knew that he had a heavy responsibility now, so he didn't keep him. Before leaving, he only warned, "Junior brother, the danger of this battle is even higher than the sword battle of the 18 sections. It wasn't easy for you to obtain your cultivation. If you feel that something is wrong, you can retreat." Zhang Yan said seriously, "I know what I'm doing." By the time he left the Danding Institute, it was already dusk. He rode all the way back to the mountain gate, opened the formation door, and entered the abode. He saw that there were a few more flying letters on the table. He went forward to take them and flipped through them. He found that one of them was sent by Yu Chongyang. It said that in another half a month, the 200 flying starry palaces would be ready to set up restrictions, and he would personally deliver it to the clear nether heavenly lake. Zhang Yan smiled slightly. With this item, not only would he be able to protect the Yuanning cultivators, he would also be able to protect the core formation disciples. Looking at Yu Chongyang's intentions, it seemed that he wanted to rely on them. This was a good thing. He thought for a while, then raised his head and asked, "Jing Yu, has Tian Kuan returned?" Jing Yu replied, "An hour ago, he returned with Miss Wang." Zhang Yan ordered, "Call him, Yin Yi and Zi Hong over. I have something to tell them." In less than 100 breaths' time, Lu Yenyi, Tian Kuan, and Wei Zihong entered the abode. They saw their master and came forward to greet him. Zhang Yan wiped his hand on the table and took out 3 divine talismans that could protect their lives. He said, "The battle this time is not a small matter. If you are not careful, your cultivation will go down the drain. This item is a talisman given to you by the sect leader. At a critical moment, it can help you escape from danger. Each of you will have one. Keep it with you and do not give it to others." Lu Yinyi did not move immediately. She looked over and asked seriously, "Since you have given this item to the 3 of you, does teacher have any other protective items?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have the Great Ways Cloud Tower in my hands. It is enough to block an attack from the Heavenly Abode Master. I still have no use for this item. You can just take it." Hearing this, the 3 of them went forward one by one and carefully kept the talismans. Zhang Yan said, "The spiritual opportunity of the Earth Meridian has appeared. The Devil's Cave may appear at any time. The Qinsong School may fight with the 6 demon sects at any time. You should go back and prepare carefully." In front of Mount Fenglai, only 2 days after the meeting of the 3 sects, hundreds of cultivators came from the east. In front of them were a man and a woman. The man's name was Shirhanshan, and the woman was his cultivation partner, Xiaoyu. Both of them were disciples of the primordial Yang sect. They were both in the 3rd level of the Yuaning realm. As for the cultivators behind the 2 of them, most of them were in pairs. There were only a few of them who were alone. Moreover, their cultivation was not high. The primordial Yang sect had a superior cultivation technique. If a man and a woman were to cultivate as cultivation partners, they would improve extremely quickly. Even the peers in the Shen men of the 3 major sects could not compare to it. Relying on this technique, not only did they have many handsome cultivators after thousands of years, but the number of disciples they had was no less than that of the major sects like Qinsong and Yuxiao. That was also the reason why they were called the 4th Shen men of Donghua. That was why they often called themselves the 4th Shen men of Donghua. However, this technique was not without its flaws. If one of them died halfway through, the other would not be able to enter a higher realm unless he broke through and started from scratch. Since the founding of the primordial Yang sect, there were many cultivators who could have achieved the Grotto Heaven realm. However, their cultivation paths were cut short because their cultivation partners died before them. Among them, there were also some who were deeply in love with each other and chose to reincarnate with their cultivation partners. Soon, the group arrived at Mount Fenglai. Shirhanshan and Xiaoyu walked to the top of the altar and looked to the west. After a while, Xiaoyu asked, "Senior Martial Brother, there is spiritual energy in a radius of 10,000 miles. Where is the place where the Devil's Cave appears?" Shirhanshan looked for a long time before saying, "Before the Devil's Cave condenses, there are signs of spiritual opportunity stirring. However, this place might not be the real one." Xiaoyu said doubtfully, "Master once said that the Devil's sect tried to confuse me with the Phantom Cave in order to protect the true cave. Even the Taoist master could see through it. What can Senior Martial Brother do by asking to come here?" Shirhanshan smiled confidently and said, "That makes sense. My wife, just wait and see what I can do." He looked after the disciples behind him. "All of you listen up. Follow Mount Fenglai to the west, north, and south. Set up a spell formation every 100 miles. Without my order, don't stop. Violators will be severely punished." The group of disciples solemnly answered, bowed, and dispersed to set up the spell formation. Xiaoyu thought for a while and said, "Husband, this method seems to be the method that Taoist Master Zhang of Qinsong School used to deal with the Devil's sect?" Shirhanshan chuckled and said, "My wife saw through it. That's right, I'm imitating Taoist Master Zhang of Qinsong School. I don't care if the Devil's Cave is real or fake. I only care about setting up this sealing spell altar here. If the Devil's sect cultivators don't come out and wait for the Devil's Cave to appear, with the spell formation as a support, we can establish a foothold here and easily defeat them. If they can't bear it and jump out, that's exactly what I want." Didn't Taoist Master Zhang kill Feng Qingping this way? After I kill a few demons, I can go to the Taoists to ask for rewards. Xiao Yu's face was full of admiration. She said, husband has a good plan. Shirhanshan waved his hand, but he couldn't hide the pride on his face. After talking for a while, Shirhanshan looked at the sun and said with a frown, "Why aren't the fellow Taoists of Taihao School and Nanhua sect here yet?" After the leaders of the three great mystical sects had a meeting the day before, Yuanyang sect didn't want to be left out, so they specially invited Taihao School and Nanhua sect to Mount Fenglai for a meeting. These two sects were very close to the three great sects, and they didn't want to go with the three great sects to attack the Devil's Cave. Therefore, when Yuanyang sect made the request, they readily agreed. Xiao Yu comforted him, "Senior martial brother, since the two Taoists have agreed, they won't go back on their word." Shirhanshan snorted and sneered, "I'm not afraid that they won't come. Without my Yuanyang sect's help, with just the strength of these two sects, they won't be able to surpass the three great sects even after 10,000 years. Moreover, these two sects might not be able to last until then." Xiao Yu was puzzled. "Husband, the three great sects are incomparably powerful. Why does Yuanyang sect have to go against them?" Shirhanshan sighed and said, "Wife, you don't know the reason. For 10,000 years, have you seen how many sects our mystical sects have changed? But why can the three great mystical sects last for 10,000 years? That's because they use the spiritual vigor of an entire continent to create the spirit cave. The spirit cave of our seven sects can only support 5 or 6 enlightened masters, which is far from their level. Even though Yuanyang sect has been rising for thousands of years, every time we do something, we still feel like we're walking on thin ice. If we don't find a way to replace them, sooner or later, we will become a pile of dust like Honghe sect." As he said this, he heavily slapped a stone pillar on the altar. With a loud bang, the pillar was smashed into pieces. Xiao Yu silently came up and held his hand. She said, "Husband, no matter what you want to do, I'm willing to accompany you." Shirhanshan nodded his head and held her hand. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Madam, the three great tribulations. Even the enlightened masters of the heavenly abode, who used to be high and mighty, cannot transcend the world. This is a great opportunity for our generation to rise." Chapter 8:22. Huncheng Sect, Concealed Light Palace, First Hall. Yang Poi stood on the palace platform with his hands behind his back, looking at the colorful scenery at the bottom of the lake through a translucent jade wall. Not long after, a large green carp attracted his gaze, and he couldn't help but frown, seeming to be very displeased as he muttered to himself, "Even the northern underworld fish demons have come here?" With a light wave of his sleeve, a mass of lifeless gray fog suddenly rose from the bottom of the lake, churning and stirring. After a while, the fog gradually dispersed. Not only the big green carp, but also the tens of thousands of creatures in the lake had disappeared, leaving only dead silence and sand. Only then did a satisfied expression appear on his face. A few knocking sounds came from the cave, but he didn't move. He tilted his head and asked in a deep voice, "What's the matter outside?" A disciple in charge outside said, "Spiritual Master Yang, Martial Uncle Shui is here, saying he has something important to report." Yang Poi said, "Tell him to come in." After a while, a Taoist with a jade-like face, bright eyes, and thin eyebrows came from outside. He came to the bottom of the jade steps and bowed respectfully, "Greetings, Senior Martial Brother Yang." Yang Poyu glanced at him and said, "What's the matter?" Taoist Shui looked slightly worried and said, "Senior Martial Brother, Shirhanshan and his wife have built more than 10 altars on the surface. I'm afraid that if this continues, Yuanyang sect will have the upper hand." Fenglai Mountain's location happened to be sandwiched between two spirit caves, one fake and one real, and was considered close to Yuanyang sect. Shirhanshan's altars were built towards the west, because Taihao sect and Nanhua sect were keeping an eye on the eastern spirit cave, so they didn't pay attention to it for the time being. But now, they had unintentionally set their sights on this real cave. Yuanyang sect, in terms of manpower and materials, couldn't be compared to those small sects that depended on Qinsong school, so their progress in building altars was quite fast. Yang Poyu had already noticed it before he started, and said, "Shirhanshan is following Zhang Yan's example, trying to force us to come out and fight him, so that he can take our heads to the sect and ask for rewards. Priest Shui asked nervously, then what should we do? Yang Poyu acted as if nothing had happened and said, there's no need to panic. After a few days, when they relax, we can find a way to eliminate them. Taoist Shui suddenly panicked, waved his hand and said, Senior brother, you can't do that. Wouldn't that be following the Yuan Yang sect's plan? Didn't you see Feng Qingping of the Blood Soul sect lose his life just like that? Yang Poyu's eyes suddenly turned cold. I, Yang Poyu, am not Feng Qingping and Shirhan's Han is not that Zhang Yan. He said, Junior brother Shui, don't try to mix things up. Taoist Shui felt a chill run down his spine when he was stared at by Yang Kai's cold and merciless eyes. He could barely stand. He knew that a few elders had been forced to be dismembered and reincarnated because of their incompetence. This senior brother of his could not tolerate anyone going against him in the slightest, otherwise, the outcome would definitely not be good. Thus, he hurriedly lowered his head and said, Yes, senior brother is right. This little brother has misspoken. Yang Poyu was expressionless. He said, You may leave. Taoist Shui wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and retreated, trembling with fear. Yang Poyu casually picked up a jade talisman from the table, threw it to the bottom of the stairs and said, Shui Pingxia is afraid before the battle has even begun. It's embarrassing for him to bear such a great responsibility. I order him to help the Bone Yin sect guard the void acupoint. As soon as he finished speaking, a gust of chilly wind suddenly blew in the hall. Amidst the whistling sound, an indiscernible shadow flew across the hall and swept away the talisman. In just a few breaths, it disappeared again, as if it had never appeared. Yang Poyu stood still, his eyes narrowed. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long while, he stood up, walked to an altar behind him, and lit a tall incense stick himself. As the green smoke rose, Taoist Master Huan's figure gradually appeared. He bowed and said, This disciple is in a hurry to see Taoist Master. Please forgive me if I disturbed you. Taoist Master Huan looked down and said slowly, Is it because of the Yuan Yang sect's altar? Yang Poyu nodded and said, Yes. Shirhan's Han is a sinister person. If we let him go on like this, how can we compete with the Yuan Yang sect in the future? In my humble opinion, it's best to get rid of him as soon as possible. Taoist Master Huan said, It's not difficult for you to see that this person is doing this to lure our disciples out. Yang Poyu said, This disciple has also thought of this, but in my opinion, Shirhan's Han thinks too highly of himself. The reason why Zhang Yan could use this strategy was because he was the number one in the 18 sword duels. Among his peers, there were few who could rival him. Even Feng Qingping, who was defeated, had never thought of fighting him. But Shirhan's Han and his wife are different. They have only been in the third layer of the Yuanying realm for 30 years. If their eldest disciple, Qiao Jingdao, was here, he might have to be more cautious. But these two are still weak, and I believe I can easily take them down. Taoist Master Huan said, Have you ever thought that even if you take care of these two, it will not solve the root of the problem? The Yuan Yang sect has many disciples and can still send people here. What will you do then? Yang Poyu cupped his hands and said, Therefore, disciple has a plan. If Taoist Master Huan approves, it can help our Hunching sect pass this round easily. Taoist Master Huan was slightly surprised and said, Tell me about it. Yang Poyu's eyes flickered and he unconsciously lowered his voice. Taoist Master, we can leak the news that the spirit cave in the north is real and find a way to let Taihao, Nanhua, and Yuan Yang sects know about it. But they won't be in the mood to fight with me here. They will only gather their forces to the north and compete with Qinsong for the chance to suppress the spirit cave. Even with Taoist Master Huan's shrewdness, his expression changed slightly. If the spirit cave was broken, one could obtain an origin furnace pill jade. This item was not very useful to the 3 great sects, but to the other 7 profound sects, it was a rare treasure. Thus, if they did this, it was extremely likely that they would succeed. But the strength of the profound sects was there and did not decrease at all. If the pressure on Hunching sect lessened, it meant that the Shueshua sect had to bear more. This plan could be said to be benefiting oneself at the expense of others. If someone else said this, he would have shouted. But Yang Poyu was different. This time, Hunching sect decided to use the spirit cave to form a cave. They would soon become fellow Taoists, so he was especially tolerant of his words. Seeing that Taoist Master Huan was silent, Yang Poyu added, although the three profound sects are restrained, our Hunching, Bon Yin, and Yuan Yang sects will have to face the 7 profound sects. It will be hard for us to resist. But if this plan succeeds, not only can we sow discord among the profound sects, it can also reduce the pressure on me. Now, the situation outside can be solved without a fight. Zhenren Huan said in a low voice. If this is done, there will be suspicion of harming fellow Taoists. It cannot be done in private and cannot be hidden from the Zenrins of the other sections. Yang Poyu said, I did not say that I want to hide it. Although the 6 sects are not one, we are united. With my current strength, it is difficult to protect 2 spirit caves at the same time. Although my plan may cause the fellow Taoists of the Shueshua sect to suffer some losses, it can at least protect 1 spirit cave. Zhenren Huan, please understand. Zhenren Huan's heart moved. He had previously probed Wen Qingxiang and it seemed that he was not willing to defend the spirit cave. If Hunching sect paid a price, it seemed that it could be done. With a solemn expression, he warned, this is a serious matter. I still need to discuss with the sections. As for the expulsion of Hans Han and his wife, you can do it first. At this point, his expression became slightly stern and he warned, before I return, do not do it in private. Do you understand? Yang Poyu lowered his head and bowed, I dare not. Zhenren Huan grunted and his figure dissipated in the smoke. After Yang Poyu respectfully sent him away, he stepped forward and extinguished the incense. Then, a murderous look appeared in his eyes. He stepped forward and turned into a gray smoke, leaping to the surface. The Hunching sect was located in Donghua. Although its main gate was hidden deep underground, it could not avoid fighting with many Shenmen sects in the continent. The sects in the sect were best at escaping and had good ears and eyes. Therefore, after thousands of battles, they did not fall into a disadvantageous position. It could be said that they were familiar with the cultivation methods and divine sense of each sect. He believed that if he fought seriously, he could easily defeat any one of Hans Han and his wife. But if he fought against the couple together, it would be a little more troublesome, especially the life-killing sort of the Yuan Yang sect. What was more troublesome was that Fenglai Mountain was not far from the mountain gate of Yuan Yang sect, and there were more than 10 altars erected around it just now. Even if he defeated them, he could either hide in the altars or retreat to the mountain gate. But he had recently learned a divine sense, which was the great spiritual gate method from 10,000 years ago. He was confident that if he fought against the couple, he would have a 60% chance of winning. After he left the mountain gate, he did not come out from the front. Instead, he went along the underground river tunnel and made a big circle before reaching the surface. When he saw the sun, he used one of the 3 escape techniques of the Devil's Doctrine, the 9 wounding smoke escape technique. His body turned invisible and flew to Fenglai Mountain like a wisp of smoke. An hour later, he was hundreds of miles away from Fenglai Mountain. He did not go forward, but landed on a mound and used the 1,000-mile alluring sound and the 9 nether candle to carefully investigate the situation in front of him. After a while, he frowned. At this moment, in Fenglai Mountain, besides the disciples of Yuan Yang sect, there were many more people who looked like disciples of Taihao sect and Nanhua sect. Seeing this, the killing intent in his heart increased. The killing intent in his heart grew stronger. However, Yuan Yang sect alone was not easy to deal with. If Taihao sect and Nanhua sect joined them, it would be much more difficult to deal with them. He raised his hand, wanting to summon all the people in Hunching sect who had the same cultivation method as him and kill all the disciples of the 3 sects here. However, he slowly put down his hand halfway through his action. There are not many disciples of these 2 sections. It seems that they are not here to build the altar. I'm afraid they are here to discuss business, just like the 3 sects of Shenmen last time. They will probably go back. Why don't I wait for them to leave before I start? He shook his sleeves, sat cross-legged on the mountain, and waited patiently. The sky gradually darkened. When night fell, 2 rays of light flew out from Fenglai Mountain. One was riding a gourd, the other was riding a demon bird. Both of them flew eastward and soon disappeared into the boundless night. Yang Poyu's eyes lit up. He suddenly stood up, and then his body disappeared with the wind like a wisp of smoke. When he reappeared, he was already on the top of the mountain. After appearing and disappearing dozens of times, he was already at the foot of Fenglai Mountain. Chapter 8:23. 2 days later, while Zhang Yan and Han Wanka were discussing Tao techniques in the cave abode, a golden ray of light flew in from outside. He recognized that it was sent by a disciple stationed outside the sect. Thinking that something important must have happened, he immediately reached out and received the letter. He scanned through the letter and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He then handed the letter to Han Wanka and said, "Yesterday in front of Mount Fenglai, Yuan Yang sect's Shirhan's Han and his wife fought with Hunqing sect's Yang Poyu. Both of them were defeated." Han Wanka was shocked. He quickly took the letter and read it carefully. Since the beginning of the devil tribulation, except for Zhang Yan, there were very few Yuanying third-stage cultivators who came out to fight. He didn't expect that Yuan Yang sect would fight this time. The contents of the battle were written in great detail. It even mentioned that Yang Poyu's Tao techniques were strange. He gained the upper hand in just a few moves, and the Shi couple couldn't fight back. If it wasn't for the fact that both of them carried a protective treasure given to them by their masters, they would have probably perished long ago. But even so, they came back with serious injuries. They wouldn't be able to recover without resting for a few years. More than 100 disciples of Yuan Yang sect were killed. When Yuan Yang sect heard about this, they were furious. They immediately sent their eldest disciple, Qiao Jingdao, to guard Mount Fenglai and set up the altar. But Yang Poyu didn't appear again, as if he didn't dare to show himself. Yuan Yang sect finally regained some face. However, when Han Wanka read the letter, he frowned. In the past, he had fought with the disciples of Hunqing sect. Although he wasn't familiar with their techniques, he knew a thing or two about them. However, the methods that Yang Poyu used in the letter were things that he had never heard of before. He sighed and said, "The devil sect's Tao techniques need to be refined by devils. In the past, the devil cave didn't have much spiritual qi, so many techniques couldn't be learned. Now that the devil tribulation has started, the spiritual qi in the devil cave will flourish. With the help of the devil tribulation, the top techniques from 10,000 years ago may appear one by one. We need to be very careful." Zhang Yan said, "I've thought about it as well. I wanted to search the Skysift courtyard to see if I could find some useful books. However, it's sealed by a restriction, and I'm not the third High Palace's temple master." Han Wanka sighed. "What a pity, Master left behind many books in the cave in the past. Some of them were even transcribed from the Sift courtyard, so perhaps you can find some mysteries from them. However, the heavenly abode was opened by Master with great magic power, and it has long been sealed. Unless there's a spiritual master with magic power no less than Master, it's difficult to enter." Zhang Yan listened. He couldn't help but shake his head. Even if the Taoist book left behind by the heavenly abode didn't contain the methods of the devil doctrine, it was still very valuable. However, spiritual master by Yang's mana was so powerful that the only person in the sect who could beat him in mana was probably the sect leader. As the leader of the sect leader Qin would definitely not forcefully break into the heavenly abode of his own sect. He said in a deep voice, "I'll make a trip to Huanjin Temple to visit the sect's eldest disciple, Liang Fengguang, spiritual master Liang. This sect has been fighting with the devil doctrine for thousands of years, so they should be very familiar with their methods. I'd like to find out a thing or two." Han Wanka thought about it and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhang, you're the leader of the sect, and your every move shouldn't attract attention. How can you leave without permission? How about I do it for you?" Zhang Yan thought for a while and agreed, "That's fine." Han Wanka stood up and cupped his hands. The devil's cave might appear at any time, so there's no time to lose. I'll go back and make some preparations. I'll make a trip to Huanjin Temple. Zhang Yan also stood up, and with a wave of his sleeve, a stream of light flew out. The situation in the continent is dangerous now. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for Senior Marshal Brother to go alone, so I'll lend you the lofty cloud tower to protect you. Han Wonka didn't reject it, and kept it in his sleeve. He then bowed, turned around and walked out. Half a month later, Tai House School, the main house, Duguang Mountain. Today, Nanhua Sect Grotto Heaven Jinren Huang Yugong came to visit, so the gate formation was also opened. However, the two families frequently visited each other, so they were already used to it. Therefore, there was no abnormality in the sect, and it was still the same as usual. At noon, white feathers fluttered in the sky like snow and frost. They fluttered down and landed in front of the mountain gate, transforming into an elegant, tall, and thin old Taoist with a white beard that reached his chest. Among the three grotto heavens in Tai House sect, Jinren Dongshi of the Hidden Tomb had the closest relationship with him. He personally came out to welcome him, and after a few words of greeting, he invited him into the mountain. Inside the cave, they sat according to the host and guest. Huang Yugong said, "Taoist brother, you called me in a hurry, and you're not willing to turn into a shadow. Is there something important?" Jinren Dongshi's expression was solemn, and he said, "It is indeed a big matter between our two families, so I specially invited you over to discuss it." Jinren Dongshi was slightly surprised, and the smile on his face instantly disappeared. He said, "Taoist brother, please speak." Jinren Dongshi said, "Now that the devil's acupuncture point has appeared, there are as many as 5 of them. Taoist brother, do you know which one is the real one?" Huang Yugong's heart skipped a beat, and he glanced over, stroked his beard lightly, and said, "Since Taoist brother has asked such a question, I guess you already have an idea?" He was just asking to test him, but he didn't expect Jinren Dongshi to confess. "That's right. I already know where the real acupuncture point is." Huang Yugong was stunned, and he quickly asked, "Where is it?" Jinren Dongshi's body leaned forward, and he slightly lowered his voice. "It's in the north." Huang Yugong was shocked, and he said, "Is it the one that Qinsong School is going to deal with?" Huang Yugong thought for a while, and he frowned. "Where did you get this information from, Taoist brother?" Jinren Dongshi smiled and said, "The devil doctrine can plant spies in the Taoist sect, and we can also plant spies in the devil doctrine." Huang Yugong still didn't dare to believe him easily. He said in a deep voice, "Such an important matter, I think only a few people in the devil doctrine know about it, so how could we know about it? Could it be a bait? You must be careful, Taoist brother." Jinren Dongshi knew that if he didn't say something, it would be hard to convince this old friend of his, so he said with a serious face, "Don't worry, Taoist brother. After learning about this, the leader of my sect borrowed the treasures left behind by our patriarch and went deep into the cave in the north to investigate. After a few rounds, he concluded that the devil's acupuncture point is most likely the real one." Huang Yugong couldn't help but be moved. He fell into silence, and after a long time, he said, "If that's the case, then Qinsong School has picked up a bargain." Jinren Dongshi chuckled and said, "Have you ever thought about suppressing this devil's acupuncture point before Qinsong School does?" Huang Yugong's expression didn't change. Just now, he had already guessed Jinren Dongshi's intention. He said, "Such an important matter should be decided by the leaders of our two sections. What's the point of asking me?" Jinren Dongshi said meaningfully, "Why do you have to say that, Taoist brother? The leader of your sect doesn't care about external affairs. The suppression of the devil's acupuncture point has been entrusted to you, Taoist brother Huang. Even the disciple in charge is your disciple. If you can't make the decision, then who can?" Huang Yugong just stroked his beard and said nothing. Jinren Dongshi laughed and continued, "Have you ever thought about it? If the real acupuncture point is destroyed, it will be hard to avoid the birth of the Yuan Furnace pill. Qinsong School won't benefit from it, but it will be very useful to our two sections. If that's the case, why would we let go of such an opportunity?" Huang Yugong looked calm on the surface, but his mind was in turmoil. As far as the spirit cave was concerned, The three major sects were enlightened by the spiritual vigor of an entire continent, while the pure energy of Donghua continent was divided among the 7 sections. If the former was like a raging river, then the latter was just a tributary. The two could not be compared at all. However, if he could get his hands on a treasure like the Yuan furnace pill, he might be able to provide for a heavenly abode. To him, this was a great temptation. He was not willing to let it go just like that. After a long silence, he sighed and said, "But if we do this, will it displease Qinsong school?" Zhenren Dongsher saw that Huang Yugong had finally relented, and he burst out laughing. "Brother Huang, you worry too much. If our 2 sects really decide to do this, we only need to say that we have found the real acupuncture point. For the sake of Xianmen, we have to give up the fake acupuncture point and head north. By then, we can suppress the Devil's Cave. Do you think Qinsong school will go to war with US because of this?" Speaking of this, he smiled again and said, "The person in charge of Qinsong school this time is Zhang Yan. Brother Huang, you should know that this person is not a heavenly abode, and his ability to suppress the Devil's Cave has been taken away. The possibility of someone standing up for him after this is very small." Huang Yugong nodded and said, "That makes sense." Suppressing the Devil's Cave was a great achievement for the current generation of disciples of Qinsong school. If their sects destroyed the Devil's Cave in advance, they would lose this achievement and their path to the heavenly abode would probably be cut off. If it were any other disciple, doing this would definitely incur the dissatisfaction of the true master of the heavenly abode. But, since it was Zhang Yan, there would be no such concern. Zhenren Dongsher continued, "But, it seems like this person is highly appreciated by Sun Jian, Shen Baishuang, and the others. Then it is simple. After this is over, we will personally pay a visit to Qinsong school and send some good gifts to them. After that, we will bring some gifts to the disciples of Qinsong school. This way we can make up for what we owe them." Huang Yugong shook his head and sighed. "Alas, with our status, we have schemed against a junior. Even if we succeed, we will still lose face." Zhenren Dongsher did not agree with him. Compared to the prosperity of a sect, face is not worth mentioning. That Zhang Yan has an outstanding talent. Among the younger generation of the 7 sects, only a few can compare with him. If we can stop his path to the heavenly abode, it might be a good thing. Huang Yugong nodded. "But, the Qinsong school is located in the northern region. It will only take us half a day to reach that Devil's Cave. If we want to take it down, we have to finish it before the disciples of Qinsong school. Since this is the true cave, the defense of the Devil sect must be quite strong. It will be very difficult to break through it in a few hours." Zhenren Dongsher smiled and said, "I have thought about your concern, brother. Now I have a solution." "I would like to hear the details," said Huang Yugong. Zhenren Dongsher said, "If it is only the 2 of us, the chance of success is not high. But, if we can get the help of the Yuanyang sect, it will be much easier." Huang Yugong nodded silently. There was a limit to the number of Yuan furnace jades. If possible, he would like to share it equally between the 2 sections. But, in fact, it was not enough for the disciples of the 2 sects to do this. They had to get the help of the Yuanyang sect. The number of disciples of this sect was no less than the 3 major sects of Xianmen. Especially with the Yuanyang sect taking the lead, even if the Qinsong school really wanted to punish them, they would not come to them first. Chapter 824. In Fenglai Mountain, after Yuanyang sect's Shi couple was defeated, the eldest disciple Qiao Jingdao came to guard this place. He continued to order his disciples to build altars outside the mountain to suppress the Devil sect. However, only half a month had passed, and the place that was originally suspected to be the Spirit Cave had moved more than 1,000 miles to the northwest. Looking at the situation, it seemed that there would be more changes. Qiao Jingdao understood that before the Spirit Cave was completely formed, the Qi activity was unstable. He could only see its general direction, and no one knew where it would be in the end. However, if he did that, most of his previous efforts would be wasted. But now, he stopped moving. He thought about it carefully and decided not to recklessly build more altars in front of him. He only built a few more altars in places where spiritual vigor was accumulated. After a few days, he suddenly received a letter from the sect. His expression changed, and he immediately handed over the matter at hand to his disciple Bo Baisong. After taking care of it carefully, he returned to the sect alone as fast as he could. Yuanyang Sect's mountain was located in the middle of Donghua. It was called Mingbai Mountain. The mountain was shaped like a big plate, and there was a hole in the middle that contained a large lake. The water was clear and bright, and there were mountains surrounding it. Looking from the sky, it looked like a piece of flawless jade. As the eldest disciple of Yuanyang sect, Qiao Jingdao's escape technique was not his forte, but no one in the same generation could match him. Using his full strength, he returned here in less than half a day. After entering the mountain, he didn't go back to his own cave residence, but went straight to Baoyu Zhuguang Cave. After traveling for half a minute, he arrived at the entrance of the cave residence. He lowered his body and loudly said his name, asking to see him. Not long after, a beautiful girl came out. She bowed to him, then waved her sleeves, and a glowing array door appeared on the ground. She smiled and said to him, "Senior Marshal Brother, Master is asking you to come in." "Thank you, Junior Marshal Sister." Qiao Jingdao bowed, stepped through the array door, and entered the depths of the cave residence. He saw a woman in a hemp robe sitting cross-legged, and her hair was tied up in a high bun. She looked about 30 years old. Between his eyebrows was a heroic spirit. He hurriedly walked forward and bowed respectfully. Disciple greets Zhenren Wen. Zhenren Wen looked calm and said, "Righteous path. Did you receive my letter?" Qiao Jingdao said, "I came precisely for this matter." Perfected Master Wen nodded. He said amiably, "When this matter is decided, it's a bit rushed. You're a steady person, so I think you have other ideas." In the Yuanyang sect, there were only 3 people amongst this generation of disciples that didn't rely on Tao companions and purely relied on their own cultivation to attain the 3rd level of the nascent soul realm, and Qiao Jingdao was one of them. Thus, everyone regarded him extremely highly. Qiao Jingdao said in a deep voice, "Since this proposal was made by all of you Zhenren, I have no objections. However, ever since Zhenren Zhang took charge of the Qinsong school, not even a drop of water has been leaked. They will definitely be fully prepared in advance. Once the Devil's Cave is out, they will definitely attack immediately. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to act before they do. If the Devil sect was given sufficient time to prepare, then they would definitely set up layers of formations in front of the Devil Cave to block the Celestial Sect of Wonders. If they really succeeded, even if the Celestial Sect of Wonders could take down this place, they would have to pay a heavy price." In his opinion, with Zhang Yan's means, there was no way he would give the Devil sect a chance to breathe. But if that was the case, they would not be able to intervene at all. Instead, he agreed, "Righteous sect, you're right. Zhang Yan seems to be a bold person, but he always plans before he acts. There are few flaws that can be found. Normally, there is no chance. But since all of you Zhenren have made this plan, how can there be no way to deal with it? Come forward and take a look at this thing." Qiao Jingdao obeyed and walked forward. Perfected Master Wen opened his palm and revealed a stack of talismans. He said, "These are the earthly divine talismans made by Perfected Shi of the Taihao school. There are 5 of them in total. They can help you avoid the Devil sect's prohibition and go straight to the Devil's Cave from underground." Qiao Jingdao said in surprise, "Oh, there's such a treasure?" Just like the Celestial Sect of Wonders had built altars on the surface, the Devil sect had long set up talismans in the underground where spiritual vigor was condensed to prevent the Celestial Sect of Wonders from breaking in from underground. Previously, when Zhang Yan ordered the small sects to build altars, the reason why the Blood Soul sect was so nervous was because they were afraid that he would break the prohibition. If the disciples of the 3 sects could not pass through the surface, they could go underground and avoid the interception of the major sections. Then, they could indeed complete the task before the Qinsong school. Perfected Master Wen smiled and said, "Take it." Qiao Jingdao reached out and took it. Seeing that there were only 5 talismans, he could not help but frown and said, This number is a little too little. Can I ask Perfected Sure for a few more? Perfected Master Wen smiled and said, don't think too much. Even these few talismans were made by Perfected Sure at the expense of his essence and blood. Moreover, these talismans are not without flaws. If Perfected Master Dong Tian were to check them, he would not be able to hide it. Therefore, it would be useless even if there were more people. Qiao Jingdao's heart skipped a beat. It was hard to say for the Celestial Sect, but the Devil Sect was very likely to discover their whereabouts. If they could not reach the depths of the Devil's Cave in time, all their previous efforts would be wasted. After a moment of silence, he said, then whether we succeed or not, it all depends on fate. Perfected Master Wen did not deny it and said, that is true. But under the 3 great trials, no one can transcend outside. We all rely on the sects to survive. Now that there is a chance for us to prosper, we must firmly grasp it. Don't you think so? Qiao Jingdao nodded solemnly. There were 3 great trials in 1,000 years. The 3 sects that had existed for 10,000 years, Qinsong, Yuxiao, and Shaoqing might be able to survive safely, but the Yuanyang sect might not be able to. Even if there was a slim chance, they had to fight for it. They could not let it go. As the eldest disciple of the sect, he was naturally responsible for this. He bowed and said, may I ask, Perfected Master, who are the people accompanying me? Perfected Master Wen said, Shi Muhua of Taihao and Yuan Zirong of Nanhua. As for the sect, Shi Hanshan and Xiao Yu were defeated by Yang Poyu. After they recover from their injuries, they will also go with you to atone for their mistakes. Hearing the names of these 2 people, Qiao Jingdao was immediately relieved. Although Shi, Yu, Taihao, and Nanhua were not the eldest disciples of the sect, they had been in the 3rd realm for more than 100 years. Their cultivation and divine abilities were not weak. If the 3 of them joined forces, they would not be a match for ordinary opponents. Even if they encountered Yuan Hongyang, they had the confidence to fight. Since the Shi couple were from the same sect, with their help, the Yuanyang sect was obviously the leader of this trip. Perfected Master Wen warned again, although we know where the true cave is, we cannot set up the altar on Mount Fenglai. If we suddenly stop, it will inevitably arouse suspicion. Qiao Jingdao said, I will rush back now and urge the sect to set up the altar. I will not let the devil doctrine see through us. After a few more words, he left the cave and returned to Mount Fenglai to take charge of the situation. At the same time, Taihao and Nanhua kept sending people to the Eastern Devil Cave, as if they wanted to force the devil doctrine to come out and fight like the Yuanyang sect. However, this was only for show. The 2 sects did not want to fight with the devil doctrine here. When the time was right, they would send their disciples to the north to seek the true cave. Anjin Temple, 7 Stars Palace of Demons Subduing Mountain. This was the place where the eldest disciple, Liang Fengshuang, cultivated. However, at this moment, the disciple of the sect, Jin Qiangyang, was arguing with a white-bearded Daoran in the main hall. Jin Qiangyang said, Elder Ping, Perfected Master Han has been here for 10 days. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. We must give an explanation. The white-bearded elder sighed. Junior Sister Jean, I have already told you that in order to deal with the devil doctrine, eldest senior brother has been cultivating in seclusion for many days. How could he come out at this time? Jin Qiangyang took a step forward and grabbed his sleeve. She said angrily, I don't have to find eldest senior brother. Senior brother Pooh has already taken out the 1st volume of the Exorcist canon and lent it to Perfected Master Han. I will not pester you anymore. The white-bearded elder shook his sleeve, but he could not get rid of it. He said helplessly, the 1st volume only records some secret magic of the devil doctrine. Since it is a request from a fellow cultivator of the profound sect, I think it is fine to give it to him. Jin Qiangyang said happily, then why don't you take it out now? The white-bearded elder sighed again and said, Junior sister, you also know that this is an important ceremony of the sect. The 2 perfected masters have not been involved in the outside affairs for a long time. Everything is decided by eldest senior brother. How could I dare to make my own decision? When eldest senior brother punishes me, will you bear the responsibility or will I? Jin Xiongnyang could not help but feel bitter. After going around in circles, she came back to the same point. She said, "Perfected Master Han did not come empty-handed. He is willing to exchange a few magic arts with me. Is this not acceptable?" Hearing this, the white-bearded Daoran showed a displeased expression. He said, "Our Ina temple has its own magic arts. Why do we need other people's magic arts? Junior Sister Jean, the arts you practice are not the orthodox ones of our sect. Of course, you don't know the power of our sect's magic arts. I will not blame you. But don't mention this again." With a sweep of the horsetail whisk in his hand, Jin Xiongnyang felt her body tremble and was blown away by a gust of strong wind. She couldn't help but fly down the mountain. She repeatedly made hand seals, wanting to stabilize her body, but she couldn't do it. She only stopped when she was outside the palace gate. She raised her eyebrows and wanted to go inside. But she realized that there was a restriction on the palace gate. Helpless, she could only turn around and walk outside the decorated archway. She saw Han Wonka was still waiting outside the gazebo. She walked forward, bowed, and said with an apologetic tone, "Taoist Master Han, this time I made you come in vain." Han Wonka knew that this matter was not big, but it was not small. If there was no one to take charge, it would be difficult. But Jin Xiongnyang was too enthusiastic. It was not good to reject her. So he did not mind. Instead, he comforted her, "Fellow Taoist Jin, there is no need to rush this matter. I have nothing to do. Just wait a few more days for perfected Master Liang to come out." Hearing this, Jin Xiongnyang felt even more guilty. Back then, her 4 fellow disciples received help from Zhang Yan. After refining the treasure banner, they were able to enter a celestial abode. Later on, 2 of them entered the state of Yuaning. Both of them received help from the banner. She had always wanted to return this huge favor. Today, Han Wonka came to visit only to flip through the records of the Devil Sect's divine arts. If it were not for the fact that the last few volumes of the book recorded an extremely powerful divine art, he would even be able to look through it when he was looking for a disciple. It would be too unreasonable if he did not help with such a small matter. She bit her lower lip and pondered. Suddenly, her beautiful eyes lit up. She thought to herself, "How could I forget? Junior Sister Zhang has read most of our sect's Tao books. Why don't I go ask her?" Chapter 825. After Jin Xiongnyang made up her mind, she said, "Zhenren Han, I thought of someone. She must have read the exorcism key manual. We can ask her to write it down. But this way, we won't be able to see the original copy. What do you think?" Han Wonka knew that there would be some differences between the original copy and the copy, but it was already good enough that he was able to take out the secret manual of his sect. Thus, he did not expect too much and said, "If so, I can go back and report." Jin Xiongnyang said, "Zhenren Han, please follow me." She rode on the strong wind and flew down the mountain with her body wrapped around. Han Wonka rode on the conveyance light and followed. He rode on the conveyance light all the way and saw that there were temples all over the place. Each of them was shrouded in colorful light and the spiritual essence was overflowing. The temples appeared and disappeared in the auspicious clouds. After flying for 100 breaths, Jin Xiongnyang's conveyance light turned and suddenly went up. He also waved his sleeves and followed closely. Not long after, a golden temple appeared in the clouds. It was backed by the majestic Tsang Mountain and was supported by thick clouds and fog. The golden light was shining brightly and it looked like a heavenly temple. There were 2 big watchtowers outside the temple that went up 100 steps. There was a big copper siaji cauldron that was filled with incense and smoke. At this moment, the sun was hanging in the blue sky and under the bright light, there was a board that said, "Treasure Sun Great Hollow." Han Wonka recognized that this was where Huanzhen Temple Zhenren Pang cultivated. The person who came to visit Jin Xiongnyang must have a high status. He asked, "May I know who we are going to see?" Jin Xiongnyang smiled and said, "This junior apprentice sister is Zhang Zhen, a disciple of Zhenren Pang. She cultivated for less than 300 years and achieved yuaning. I'm afraid she will be the successor of Zhenren Liang in the future. Han Wanka stroked his beard and thought. The two Zhenren of Huanjin Temple Zhenren Pang have a lifespan of more than 2,000 years. I'm afraid they won't be able to make it through the 3 heavenly trials. Liang Fengguang was nurtured by the sect and will have a great opportunity to enter the Great Hollow. Once this person is gone, the person who will be in charge of the sect in the future will be gone. It must be Zhang Zhen, Zhenren Zhang. The two of them slowly landed on the steps of the Golden Hall. A deacon disciple holding a jade ruler saw them and his expression turned solemn. He took the initiative to ask, Jin Zhenren, I wonder who the person beside you is. He doesn't seem to be a disciple of an Ata temple. Jin Qiangyang replied, This is Taoist Han from Qinsong School. Due to some matters, he needs to see Junior Marshal Sister Zhang. Junior Marshal brother, please inform her. The deacon glanced at Han Wanka and said, Wait here. With that, his figure disappeared through the door. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, this person came out again. Zhenren Zhang is currently waiting for you too at the Willow Frost Pond. Jin Qiangyang bowed and said, Thank you, Junior Marshal brother. The Taoist attendant bowed and let out a shout. He shook the talisman in his hand and with a rumble, a spiritual light flashed in front of the palace and an array door rose from the ground. It hung high in the air with thousands of talisman flying around it. Jin Qiangyang called out to Han Wanka and lightly floated into the array door. Han Wanka didn't hesitate and immediately followed. The two of them stepped through the array door and their vision widened. They saw a jade bridge that was thousands of feet long. They flew over 2 cliffs and went straight into the depths of the fog. Below them, there was a deep ravine that was shrouded in fog. It was a strange and dangerous place. Jin Qiangyang's expression turned solemn and said, Taoist Han, this bridge is called Crossing Adversity Bridge. It was built by the founding master. Those who cross the bridge can't fly or else they will be struck down by lightning. When you leave, you only need to calm your mind and you will be able to pass in one breath. If you have any evil thoughts in your mind, you will be trapped here and unable to escape. Even if someone from the heavenly abode helps, they won't be able to get out. Han Wanka looked over and said, I have heard of this bridge. Rumor has it that this bridge was used to imprison the cultivators of the evil doctrine. Is it true? Jin Qiangyang chuckled and said, It is true. If the cultivators of the evil doctrine come here, they will only step into a small world called the Demon Prison Cave. This place was built by my founding master. For thousands of years, the cultivators of the evil doctrine who were captured by Anjin Temple were all exiled here. When the masters of the sect test their disciples, they will often order them to come here to kill the demons. If they can kill the demon without the help of treasures or other sect members, the sect will definitely give them a cave abode and treasures as a reward. At this point, she sighed and said, It is a pity that what I learned was left behind by the predecessors and not the true teachings of Anjin Temple. I can't enter and leave this world freely, so I don't have this opportunity. Han Wanka laughed and said, Everyone's fate is different. Jin Zhenren was able to obtain the Tao in the celestial abode and enter the state of yuaning. You don't know that in the eyes of others, it is also a great opportunity and worthy of envy. Jin Qiangyang covered her mouth and laughed and said, That's true. How can I take all the benefits? At this moment, the mountain wind blew and their clothes fluttered. Jin Qiangyang stroked her hair and said, Be careful, Zhenren Han. Then she walked towards the bridge. She had walked this bridge several times, so once she stepped on it, her emotions were as still as water. She entered the state of oblivion and just walked forward with her true self. After an unknown amount of time, the chi dynamic in her body shook and she woke up from a dream. She opened her eyes and looked back. She saw Han Wanka standing behind her and his expression and actions were the same as just now. There was no change at all. It was obvious that he crossed the bridge easily. She couldn't help but think Zhenren Han is indeed a great cultivator of the 3rd stage. His cultivation is profound. In the past, when I crossed this bridge, it took me a whole day to walk out from the inside. At this moment, they suddenly felt a surge of spiritual vigor. They looked up and saw the white clouds parting and a shuttle-shaped flying ship descending. On the ship stood a graceful woman in a fluttering white robe. She had a pair of red and translucent horns on her forehead that looked like coral glass. Han Wonka could see that this woman was a demonic body that entered Tao. However, it was common for a celestial abode master to raise demonic beasts to guard his abode. When Li Gazhang was still around, there were many great demons of the northern underworld guarding White Sun Grotto. Therefore, Han Wonka was not surprised at all. The woman bowed to the two people below and said, "Are you Jinren Jin and Jinren Han?" Jin Qiangyang said, "Yes." "Are you Jinren Pang's disciple, Fairy Chiu?" The woman smiled gently and said, "Please board the disaster-warding flying ship. It's better than the 10,000 lightning pool ahead." The two of them followed her words and flew onto the flying ship. Fairy Chiu waited for the two of them to steady themselves before turning the talisman in her hand. The flying ship stirred up a strong spiritual wind and flew towards the south like lightning. Not long after, Han Wonka heard the rumbling of thunder. He looked into the distance and saw a huge pool of thousands of meters in size. There was no lake water in it but thunder and fire. Occasionally, it would shoot into the sky and the sound would shake the sky. The 10,000 lightning pool was famous. Back then, Jinren Ru Huang of the Shueshua sect was surrounded and killed by 4 celestial abode masters. However, a strand of his soul could not be destroyed and was refined here. It was rare for Han Wonka to come here, so he wanted to take a look at it. Therefore, he walked to the side of the ship and looked down. Fairy Chiu said, "This lightning pool was originally a magic treasure that the founding master carried with him. However, after the founding master passed away, no one could use it, so it could only be left here. Any demonic weapon or filthy object that is thrown into it will be cleansed without a trace." Han Wonka looked at the majestic power of the pool of lightning and was secretly shocked. He thought to himself, "An Enna temple has a deep foundation. If it wasn't for the constant battles with the evil sect and the loss of many disciples, the Enna temple wouldn't be able to survive. It's not necessarily weaker than the Yuanyang sect." Among the Xian men of today, other than the 3 major sects, the lineage of the founding masters of the Huanjin and Taihao sects was the clearest. They could be compared to the few mighty people who suppressed the spirit sect over 10,000 years ago. Just by looking at the pool of lightning, one could imagine how shocking their methods were. About half an hour later, the sound of thunder gradually faded away. In front of them, a towering mountain appeared in the mist, but the vegetation was covered in frost. A small path could be seen in the forest, leading to the peak of the mountain. The flying boat slowly descended in front of the mountain, and Fairy Chiu said, "We have reached the boundary of the earth. Junior Sister Zhang is waiting for the two of you on the mountain." The two of them got off the boat and thanked him. She giggled and flew away on the boat. Jin Qiangyang took a careful look and happily said, "The restriction on the mountain hasn't been opened, Master Han. You and I can just go up." Han Wonka nodded, and a cloud of mist appeared under his feet. His sleeves stirred up strong winds, and he flew up together with her. In a flash, they reached the peak of the mountain. He looked around and saw that this place was about 100 acres in size, and half of it was occupied by a clear pool of water. A girl in white stood by the pool, and her eyes were clear like the autumn water. When he looked again, he felt that she had jade bones, snow-white skin, and was intelligent and beautiful, making it hard to look at her directly. Han Wonka's heart skipped a beat. This girl's beauty could be said to be like a painting, and it was hard to describe with words. However, her appearance and bearing gave him a sense of familiarity. Beside the girl was a celestial crane with a coiled neck. When it saw someone coming, it raised its neck and called out twice. She stretched out her hand and caressed its feathers, and then it calmed down. When they came closer, Han Wonka cupped his hands and said, "Han Wonka from Chinsong School took the liberty to pay a visit." Zhang Zhen curtsied and said, "So it's White Sun School's disciple? This little girl greets you." Jin Qiangyang was obviously quite familiar with her, and went forward to hold her hand. She said, "Junior Sister Zhang, I came here today because there's a troublesome matter." Senior Sister thought about it, and only Junior Sister might have a solution. Zhang Jin looked over and said, "Senior sister doesn't casually ask for help, so it must be a big matter. Why don't you tell me first? If I can help, I won't just stand by and do nothing." Jean Qiangyang patted the back of her hand and said, "Junior sister will definitely be able to help." She immediately explained her purpose of coming here. Zhang Jin made a sound of agreement, and her gaze turned to Han Wonka. She said, "Did Master Han send a letter before coming here?" Han Wonka said, "Of course. Your school's Xiao Hozhou, Master Zhao, is currently in our school, and I asked him to deliver a letter to Master Liang, but, maybe it didn't arrive. After I came here, Master Liang happened to be in isolation, and we didn't have the chance to meet until now." Jin Qiangyang said, "Senior brother also sent a letter to me, asking me to bring Master Han to find senior brother, but senior brother Pu stopped us." Zhang Zhen's expression was calm, and she said, "Senior brother Liang is in isolation under Master Liang's order. If he knew that fellow Taoist from Qinsong School is coming, he wouldn't just ignore us, so he must have taken care of us beforehand. Senior brother Pu has always been conservative. If he stopped us, it's because he has a selfish motive. He doesn't want the books in our school to be seen by others." Han Wonka was slightly startled. How could he not see that the crux of the matter was with Priest Pu? However, this was after all the territory of Huanjin Temple, and he couldn't say it directly, so he could only vaguely point it out. He didn't think that Zhang Jin didn't care about the fact that she was from the same school, and directly pointed it out. But when he thought about it again, he immediately understood this girl's intention. If this matter were to spread out, who would know about it? It was inevitable that people would mistakenly think that Liang Guang was selfish and narrow-minded, agreeing to it on the surface, but secretly ordering his disciples to evade. Zhang Zhen's action was undoubtedly to protect his reputation as the senior brother of the school. Zhang Zhen threw down a talisman and said, "Dan, take my talisman and order Pu Yugong to bring the exorcism manual here as soon as possible, without a moment's hesitation. He acted on his own, and will be punished to stay in the cold spring to reflect on his mistakes for 3 years." The red-crowned crane next to her let out a soft cry, and with the talisman in its mouth, it flapped its wings and flew out of the mountain. Han Wonka saw that she could punish a rather influential elder with a single order, and it was obvious that her position in the school was higher than he thought. After an hour, the red-crowned crane flew back, and in its beak, there were 9 jade scrolls. Zhang Zhen took them and held them in her palm and said to Han Wonka, "The exorcism manual has a total of 9 volumes, other than the first volume which only talks about the devil's Tao techniques and supernatural powers. The other 8 volumes also have some descriptions at the end. Since your school is borrowing them, please take them, Master Han." Han Wonka smiled. "Taoist Zhang is lending me the entire volume. Aren't you afraid that I will read the supernatural powers in it?" Zhang Jin said, "With the Tao techniques of Qinsong School, why would you covet the Tao techniques of Huanjin Temple?" Han Wonka nodded. This Zhang Jin may be young, but the way she conducted herself was much more generous than Daoren Pu. No wonder the school thought so highly of her. He accepted it and bowed. "Thank you, Taoist Zhang, for fulfilling my wish. After I finish reading it, I will return it in time." Zhang Jin said, "There's no need for that. This secret manual has been sealed by the seniors in the school. If the school summons it, it will fly back." Han Wonka bowed. "Then I shall take my leave." Zhang Jin nodded and said, "Send my regards to Taoist Zhang when you return." Han Wonka took his leave and didn't stay in Huanjin Temple for long. On the same day, he left Exorcism Mountain and rode on the conveyance light straight into the sky and used the conveyance light to return. There were no obstructions along the way, and in less than half a day he returned to the heavenly lake of Zhaoyu. After Jing Yu informed him, he entered the residence to see Zhang Yan and first told him about his journey and then presented the exorcism manual. After Zhang Yan accepted it, he said, "Thank you, senior apprentice brother Han." Han Wonka hurriedly said, "If it wasn't for the help of Taoist Zhang from Huanjin Temple, it wouldn't have been so easy." The two talked for a while more, and Han Wonka took his leave. Zhang Yan spread out the 9 jade scrolls on the table, and after a few glances, he stretched out his hand and lightly tapped on it. He activated his spiritual vigor, and his body shook. He felt his vision blurred, and he found himself in a secluded valley. He stood still for a moment, and suddenly felt something. He turned his head and saw a few miles away, a Taoist with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes was waving his sword, and was fighting with a cultivator who was shrouded in a deep mist. Suddenly, the cultivator's back emitted thousands of balls of fire, and just as he was about to fly up to fight the enemy, the Taoist casually pointed, and a huge pillar fell down and covered the cultivator. Then, countless spell scrolls flew up to him, and in a blink of an eye he was sealed inside. At this moment, the scene suddenly changed, and a middle-aged cultivator with an extraordinary appearance appeared. He was riding on a mystical bird, and his voice was like thunder. Behind him was a thousand-eyed bat, and as it spread its wings, thousands of spiritual lights shot down. The person opposite him waved the flag in his hand, and the millions of Yin soldiers behind him pounced forward, and in a split second, they collided. Not long after, the scene in front of him changed again. This time, it was a Taoist with a high crown, and under him was a surging river of spirits. He fought against 7 people alone, and no matter how the talisman and Taoist techniques attacked, they were all drowned by the waves. Scenes of the battle floated past his eyes, and after an hour, Zhang Yan came out from it. He smiled to himself and said, "No wonder the Unetta Temple was unwilling to take out this book at first. Those who read this book are the same as watching the people in the book fight. There are thousands of scenes of the battle in this book, and the value is immeasurable. This time, the favor sent to me is not small." However, there was a flaw in this book. He realized that there was a layer of prohibition on the Book of Exorcism, and he could only see the battle of the Yuanian cultivators, and any supernatural power that was higher than his own level was difficult to see. He thought for a while, picked up the brush, and wrote down a copy on a piece of paper. Then he instructed Jing Yu, "Go and make 100 copies, and pass it to the disciples of the sect to read." He had been in the battlefield for a long time, and he knew everything just by hearing one thing. This kind of book was considered to be of great help to him, but it was hard to say how useful it would be to the disciples of the sect. However, the battle was imminent, and it would be good if the combat power of the sect could be increased a little. He flicked his sleeves, and kept the 9 jade scrolls. He looked at the map on the wall, and the next thing was to wait for the emergence of the Devil's Cave. Chapter 8:26. In the blink of an eye, for years had passed. In the middle of the Chung River in Donghua State, on a nameless mountain, there was a cave hidden deep inside the mountain. The eldest disciple of the Yuanyang sect, Qiao Jingdao, was sitting there quietly. He had been here for half a year, and the person in charge of the Fenglai mountain was a substitute. Because the person's cultivation was similar to his, he had changed his appearance and did not show himself often. To prevent Yang Poyu from coming out again, he stopped building the altar. So until now, no one had seen through him. As far as he knew, he was not the only one who did this. All the people who wanted to sneak into the true cave of the northern region did this. This was not only to hide from the cultivators of the devil's doctrine, but also to deceive the Qinsong school, hoping to get the devil's cave first. At this moment, he suddenly felt something. He picked up a talisman and waved it. A scene appeared in a silver mirror in front of him. In the white waves, there were several green carps patrolling back and forth. One of them had especially bright eyes. It seemed to have sensed the change of qi dynamic, so it wandered in the underground river. Qiao Jingdao frowned. He could see that this was the northern underworld fish demon that Zhang Yan had placed in the major water systems. They were used as his eyes and ears. He did not care much about it before, but now it seemed like it was a big problem. Even if he flew underground, it was faster to travel through the spirit vein. This was also the place where most of the devil's doctrine's prohibitions were set up. But with the talisman as a cover, there was no need to be afraid. But now, half of the places where spiritual vigor was stagnant in the northern region were occupied by the altars of the small sects under the Qinsong school. As long as he traveled underground, he would inevitably bump into them. Both Xianmen and Xianmen had different methods. The talisman could bypass the devil's doctrine, but it might not be detected by the Xianmen. There was another troublesome matter. In another 30 days, the others would meet up with him here. But looking at the current situation, it would be hard not to be discovered. His face darkened and he raised his hand. He wanted to kill the green carp outside, but after thinking for a while, he clenched his fist and put it down. I heard that many elders of the North Yuyuan tribe have surrendered to Zhang Yan. If I hit the young ones, if the old ones come out, wouldn't all my previous efforts be in vain? He had to endure it. Don't ruin the overall situation because of a moment of impulse. He thought about it for a long time. Other than taking a detour, there was no other way. Furthermore, he couldn't let the others come here. Something unexpected had happened before, so he had to warn them. Thus, he took out a dharma plate from his sleeve, which shone with spiritual light. As soon as it appeared, it shone brightly, but in the short span of a few breaths, it retracted all of its light and became like an ordinary object. He circulated his magic power and wrote a line of words on it. This item was called the mysterious flying talisman. It was refined by the heaven-mending pavilion, and when it was sent out, it was invisible. Unless Taoist Master Heavenly Passage deliberately looked, no one would be able to discover it. However, this item was very rare. Even though he was the eldest disciple of the sect, he was only given 3 pieces. After he finished writing, he waved his sleeve lightly and sent it out. Then he entered a meditative state. After about a month, 4 rays of spiritual light suddenly flashed in this cave. 4 figures appeared one after another. They all bowed to Qiao Jingdao, who was sitting on the ground. "Greetings, Brother Qiao." "Greetings, eldest brother." Qiao Jingdao opened his eyes and looked around. He said in a deep voice, "You haven't been discovered yet, right?" Shi Muhua of Taihao School said confidently, "Brother Qiao, don't worry. We were already prepared. After receiving your message, we were extremely careful on our way here." Shi Hanshan also said, "Eldest brother, we were on the road for more than 10 days. It's to avoid detection from all sides." Qiao Jingdao nodded and said, "That's good. When the demonic cave appears, we will also have to be careful when we head north." Shi Muhua raised his eyebrows and said loudly, "Brother Qiao, I don't think we need to be like this. Qin Song School doesn't have the earthly divine talisman like us, so we can only attack from the surface. Most of the demonic sect's arrangements are here. As long as we are fast enough, what can we do even if they discover us? By the time they arrive, we will have already taken down the demonic cave. According to the agreement of the sects, the heavenly abode will deal with the aftermath. Why should we be afraid?" Shi Hanshan echoed, "Eldest senior brother, I agree with what you said. Even though the earthly divine talisman is fast, it can only last for 2 hours. If we take a detour, who knows what other variables might occur? The faster we move, the better. We must kill our way into the devil's lair before the other families can react." Qiao Jingdao pondered for a while, then turned to a handsome young Taoist on the far right and asked, "Junior brother Yuan, what do you think?" Yuan Zirong smiled and said, "Before coming here, Yellow Zhenren told me to listen to my senior brothers. Whatever you say, I will do." Qiao Jingdao said in a deep voice, "Junior brother Shi's words are reasonable. Let's do as he says." Shi Muhua said happily, "Good. Once the demonic cave appears, we will kill our way in and make a great contribution." After the 5 finished their discussion, they each chose a place to sit down. Then they calmed their minds and restrained their breath. They closed their eyes and waited for the demonic cave to appear. In the blink of an eye, another year passed. In the heavenly lake of clear serenity, Zhang Yan was guiding the cultivation of the 3rd-generation disciples. However, after saying a few words, he suddenly stopped. Then, his eyes lit up and he looked outside. Many disciples revealed bewildered expressions, and only Lu Yenyi, Tian Kuan, and Wei Zihong sensed something in their hearts, and their expressions gradually became solemn. Not long after, the disciples felt a tremor coming from under their feet. At first, it was very small, but it became more and more intense. Then, the entire heavenly lake of clear serenity began to shake. They could also hear the rumbling sound, and the tremor became more and more intense. However, when it reached the most intense moment, it suddenly disappeared, and the world returned to silence. It seemed like a moment had passed, but it also seemed like a long time. Then there were several loud rumbles, and the ground shook up and down. 5 beams of spiritual light shot up from all directions in the Donghua continent. They were like rainbows, shining in the sky, covering the sun and the sky. It was difficult to tell day from night for a moment. The surging was so intense that it was like a tsunami. Even in the Dongsheng continent, which was far away by the ocean, the cultivators in the continent also felt a little strange. Zhang Yan looked up at the sky, his eyes deep. He said in a deep voice, "The demonic cave has appeared. Pass down my chief's order, order everyone to quickly gather at the heavenly lake of clear serenity, and follow me to suppress it." Almost at the same time, Qiao Jingdao suddenly woke up from his meditation. He carefully sensed for a moment, and his eyes lit up. He stood up, took a deep breath, and said, "The time has come." The 4 people beside him also woke up at the same time and stood up. Qiao Jingdao said in a deep voice, "Everyone, success or failure depends on this. The prosperity of the sect rests on our shoulders. Don't let down the master's trust." The 4 of them nodded solemnly. Qiao Jingdao took out the earthly divine talisman from his sleeve and patted it lightly. Suddenly, a cool breeze surrounded his body, and his whole person became like a cloud, faintly discernible. The 4 of them did the same. Qiao Jingdao saw that everyone was prepared and nodded at them. The 5 of them activated their Xian Qi, and in an instant, 5 weak beams of spiritual light shot out from underground, and with the speed of lightning, they rushed towards the north. Although the earthly divine talisman could only last for 2 hours, its speed was almost comparable to that of the Yuanying cultivators flying in the sky above Jyotin. Everywhere it passed, it stirred up a lot of spiritual opportunity, but the devil's doctrine's prohibition did not sense it at all. But in the aspect of Xianmen, it was different. On an altar in front of Danyang Mountain in Beichen sect, a disciple suddenly exclaimed in surprise. His fellow disciple beside him was from the Yen family. Just now, there was an unusually big commotion in the continent, so how could he not know that the devil's cave had appeared? It was a tense moment, and when he heard the commotion, he immediately came up and asked, "What's wrong?" The disciple pointed at the talisman on the altar that had turned into ashes and said, "Just now, there are several spiritual opportunities below, and they are heading north at an extremely fast speed." The Yen family disciple's expression changed, and he asked anxiously, "Are they devil's doctrine cultivators?" The previous disciple shook his head and said, "Doesn't look like it. Look at that qi dynamic, they seem to be from our Xianmen." The Yen family disciple said, "Jinren Zhang has ordered that we should not let go of any small details. Ignore him and immediately report the situation here." The disciple immediately wrote a letter, and after sealing it, he was about to throw it into the lake when the Yen family disciple shouted, "Why do we still need a fish demon to send a letter at this time? Use a flying letter to send a letter." The disciple did not dare to disobey, and nodded in agreement. He hurriedly took the flying letter, and sent it out of the mountain. At the same time, on the path that Qiao Jingdao and the others had passed, they had alarmed a dozen or so altars in succession. One after another, flying letters soared into the sky, and continuously flew towards the heavenly lake of clear nether. In the great lake of Dragon Lake, within the Longview Yuanzhan and Light Cave, Sun Jinren was reclining on a jade couch. At this time, he suddenly sensed something, and sat up abruptly. He pushed away the beautiful servant girl beside him, and a clear divine light appeared in his eyes. He looked towards the southwest several times, and suddenly laughed coldly. He raised his hand, and a talisman appeared. Then, with a flick of his finger, it shot into the air with a whoosh. At this time, Zhang Yan had already received the letters from the various departures. Hearing that there were actually people from Xianmen traversing underground and heading north, he could not help but focus his gaze, and pondered what their intentions were. After a few breaths, suddenly, a ray of divine light flew over. His expression changed, and he stretched out his hand to touch it. Immediately, he heard the voice of Sun Jinren, the first disciple of Yuan Yang, Qiao Jingdao, and a couple of disciples from his sect, as well as 2 disciples from Taihao and Nanhua. A total of 5 Yuanian cultivators of the 3rd degree realm are heading towards the demon's cave that appeared in the north. Zhang Yan's gaze flickered slightly, and he suddenly asked, "Today, what is the situation of the 2 demons' caves in the east and west of Fenglai?" Immediately, a disciple picked up a flying letter, looked at it, and said, "The cultivators from Taihao and Nanhua are now fighting with the demonic sect. At the demon's cave in the west of Fenglai, Yuan Yang did not make a move, not even a single disciple was sent out." Zhang Yan asked again, "Where are the disciples from Huanzhen, Lishan, Pingdu, and Mending Tian?" The disciple picked up the letter and said, "In reply to Founding Master, the disciples of these 4 sects were obstructed by the elder of the Netherworld Spring sect, Ko Inglong, and they are now fighting." Zhang Yan came down to ask about the other directions, and after listening, his gaze became extremely deep. In a short moment, he had already made a clear judgment. Looking at the overall situation, 4 out of the 5 demons' caves were still considered normal, and all of them were guarded by Xuanmen's disciples. However, the demon's cave in the west of Fenglai was suddenly ignored due to various reasons, and now it was unusually empty. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.